But it's chapter 3
Hold,
of his
hold,
video.
hold on. Okay, let's look at the timestamp. 58 minutes. Good shit.
Yes.
What's that number on the right of that slash sign?
3 hours and 20 minutes. So,
Guys, I have to go shoot up the president.
Are you recording already?
yes, I got a couple things I want to say before we actually start reacting. First of all, Matt's joining us today, so that's exciting.
Yeah, so this guy obviously murdered Donald Trump.
Yes.
Or,
The last video did better than all of our videos in the last, 3 months. We got a whole 20 views. We're internet famous now, boys.
yay!
And now with my bullshit, we'll go back down to, what, 2?
-3.
Sorry, can you guys
Hell
hear the
yeah.
guitar?
Oh, shit, somebody else is here.
No.
Oh, you guys cannot hear me. That's so sad.
Oh, God, it's Zara.
Can you guys hear me? Hello?
Yes.
We can hear you! Yes!
Can you hear the guitar in the background?
You've got, fucking static on your side or some shit.
The guitar.
I can only hear it when you're talking. Oh.
Zara's
Alright.
gone.
So please explain to me what happened
Okay,
in the
so,
first part, since obviously I wasn't here.
okay, I can give the briefest of brief rundowns. Look at the title of the video. What do you think this video is about?
Oh, Jesus Christ. Okay.
What do you think it's about?
Some fucking politician bullshit or whatever.
Yeah, it sounds like it would be about bad conservative horror movies, right?
But it's political bullshit, isn't it?
Chapter 1 was him bitching about a horror movie convention for, 20, 30 minutes, Mago?
Something like that.
Part 2 was him whining about YouTube comments about a video that didn't perform very well. And it was literally 20 minutes of him just reading mean comments that he got.
So, in other words, this video is 3 hours and 20 minutes of him going, wah, wah, wah,
Well,
wah.
also, being very smug about it.
Mm-hmm.
Or he's a smug man-child, okay.
Yes.
Also, I read comments. I can't confirm this because I haven't seen the video because it's 4 hours or something. But apparently he called Courage the Cowardly Dog problematic.
Alright, this guy's a fucking retard. Okay, let's get it.
The whining about comments was great because it was just literally him crying about not only the comments were mean to me in a video where I got the context, by the way, Mago. The video that did poorly, he literally did compare the cannibals to Native Americans.
Jesus fucking Christ.
10 out of 10 would vote George Bush again, what?
So what he was whining about was the commenters were basically right.
Oh my god, alright.
Did he really mean that, or was that just what he said because he sucked at conveying himself?
Honestly, knowing what I've known from this video, he's probably being dead serious, and that's the sad thing.
Well, he contradicts himself in this video. He's already contradicted himself.
You don't say. I can really.
Okay, my honest take on it is that it could be bad wording, but it doesn't seem that way to me. It seems like he said it with his whole chest, and now he's trying to rewrite history.
2 years later, after that did happen 2 years later, to be clear.
And I can't believe Hitler was killed in World War I. That's crazy.
I know, right?
So, with all of that content... he was also whining that he can't be a full-time YouTuber anymore because he doesn't make enough money and he's had to consider getting a real job.
Wow.
No, he never mentioned anything about the possibility of getting a real job. And also, apparently, he has a partner he's supposed to be supporting.
I have a controversial take that I'm about... This guy sounds worse than Vic. I know it's controversial, but...
Is.
Wait until you see what he looks like. He even looks worse than Vic. I don't normally pick on appearances, but goddamn!
Look, this guy is the...
Hitler was the president of the United States of America.
What? Cool, Courtney. I don't even know what you said.
I heard something about Hitler.
President of the USA.
Who is this? Who is this woman coming from Matt's side? Justin.
I have no idea.
Does Matt have? You know.
I'm gonna guess it's his sister. Way before I would guess girlfriend.
Okay. That would make much more sense.
Alright, I guess we're waiting for Matt to unmute so he can listen to this bullshit with us.
No, just go ahead. Just
Okay, sounds good. Alright, picking up where we left off. We finally get to hear about bad conservative horror movies.
Hopefully, at least.
my eyes are already bleeding from this man's appearance.
In March of this year, Late Night with the Devil was released to theaters, which came with a fair share of controversy. Normally this would be a film that would make some buzz and then be quickly forgotten about by most non-horror people. But Late Night with the Devil ended up with several major articles written about it in the trades because of its use of supposedly 3 AI-generated title cards that appeared both in the trailer as well as in the film itself. The number 3 has been thrown around a lot, and I don't know if that's ever actually been confirmed. As far as I can tell, that number was stated by one of the directors in an interview, and it seems as if the production team may have been trying to minimize the actual extent that AI was used in their process. This was the narrative that they started once people got mad at them. And I myself have gone through the film and would argue that there's closer to an upwards of maybe 10 or so questionable images throughout the movie. But for the purpose of this, we will just say that it was 3 pictures. As you can well imagine, there were a lot of people within the horror community who pretended that this was either not a very big deal or wasn't unprecedented behavior, and had many excuses as to why this wasn't good, but also why we should still reward their behavior with our money. BJ Colangelo said, "Based on the style, the AI was clearly experimented with around the time everyone was sharing their AI profile pics, before we had the widespread, 'Hey, this is bad' convo. And they should have replaced it in the years since. I hope they do the right thing and swap those shots. But I've not seen the movie, so I have no idea how easily, quickly they'd be able to do that in an edit. And unlike a multi-billion-dollar company using AI for title cards, I have no idea if they have the money to do so." Richard Newby said, "Seems highly unnecessary, and I don't like AI, especially when artists are looking for work. But also, I'm not going to boycott an indie movie and the work of everyone else for what amounts to 20 seconds of AI title cards, because that doesn't help artists either. Sorry." To this, Barbara Crampton said, "Agreed." Brett Gallman said, "AI-generated image, it's not art, is a scourge to creativity that has the potential to harm the film industry. But I'm not comfortable with dismissing all the work people put into Late Night with the Devil otherwise, especially those who had nothing to do with the decision. It is deeply disappointing that they went this route, and didn't course correct during the past year, but I can't abide the logic of a boycott on behalf of artists that would ultimately just harm the artist anyway. Feels like a live and learn situation. Remember those? And if anyone does think a boycott is more productive, then more power to them. I can respect having a hard-line stance on this issue, so long as it doesn't come with a heavy dose of self-righteousness and condensation." Jamie Jirac said, "This sucks, but I want to add to the course of people explaining that it was made 2 years ago, before a lot of us realized that AI art is bad. Moving forward, I think projects that use AI should be boycotted, but this indie horror deserves a little grace due to the timeline." The real Matt C. said, "Still going to watch the Satanic Talk Show movie. Sorry, it's been recommended by friends who've seen it way too much. It looks awesome, and to be honest, yeah, AI sucks, but I'm not against low-budget projects using it in small doses like this." Last example I'll use right here, but there were many others. Salem Alexandria actually got shamed into apologizing for suggesting that people shouldn't go see the film when she tweeted, "Maturity is accepting wrong. After having people educate me on the timing in my DMs, while I'm still against AI in the creative space when it comes to creatives being replaced. They did this at a time when everyone was having fun with AI, and with it being an indie film, having to pay the talent they did have. An all-out boycott of the film is a bit extreme." So first of all, that era that Colangelo and others is referring to really is in the DALL-E mini days, and by the time that more complex images like this were being created, it was pretty well established that this was very wrong behavior. The Wild West period of AI was really only generously a few weeks there, maybe, but in actuality, probably actually more like just a few days. That the argument that AI was just a fun little thing that existed before people started to seriously talk about it, and these images were made well beyond that, as you all probably well know. Saying otherwise is revisionist history. And if you really believe and think that this usage is okay, because everyone was supposedly doing it, then that speaks more on you than anything else, because it shows that you were not listening to artists who were essentially quite vocal about the situation near immediately. This was, pure and simple, a way to cut corners and test the waters on how much audiences would tolerate the slow removal of creative people in the creative process, in the making of films on all levels. There is no other way to look at this that is ethical. And in the weeks following, other companies started to do the same, such as A24 and their horrible Civil War posters.
Yeah, but that
now,
was fucking
for full
hilarious.
transparency,
You forgot
I myself did post one
he
single
didn't even
tweet
show
that
the
was positive
fucking-
about
What a
AI,
fucking
which was
hypocrite.
clearly when it was still in the DALL-E mini phase, when it was just a strange curiosity. And when in the days following I listened to the conversation and realized
I
how
just want to
harmful
say I
this thing
love
was,
the Civil
I
War
never
image
did
where
that
they're going
again,
after the
and have
giant
never excused a large company
swan.
using it to not pay people. It really is that easy. Secondly, of course they had the money to pay for real title cards. They just decided not to. What do you think this is? How much do you think art actually costs? Anyone who thinks this can
1 cent.
genuinely only have that idea because they don't know any visual artists themselves. This
Well, you're
narrative
retarded, so
is
you wouldn't know
insane
anything.
and probably disingenuous
guy
on their
definitely
part.
couldn't pay
Critic
for it,
Rebecca
you know.
Johnson said, "It is disappointing that they used AI artwork
Oh my God,
and
another
a shame
comment. You
that
said
they
you
didn't
already
hire
did your
an
last
artist."
example.
That being said,
Fucking
I would be more disappointed if it were a big movie with an unlimited budget. This is an indie flick with a limited budget. People are acting like this was one of those fake movies that gets made for $500 and then dumped onto Amazon Prime. They could have paid for those assets for the same amount of money or less than they would have for a single advertisement for the film. The movie was produced by Roy Lee, who also produced movies like The Grudge, The Ring, The Departed, The Strangers, the Lego Batman
I get
movie,
your
It
point,
Chapter
but
1
you're like-
and Chapter 2, Barbarian, Bates Motel, The Exorcist TV
You
show,
don't have to
Dr.
fucking
Sleep,
drag it out
Godzilla
this
vs. Kong,
much.
and Godzilla
You
Kong: The
could-
New Empire,
you
among
could
like
just, like,
50 other things that you've
Post
heard
all
of.
the films
It was
on the
distributed to
screen.
movie theaters
Or you
around
could
the
not
entire
lie. You could have
country.
listed
Do
Do you
two.
genuinely think that they would not be able to come up with a couple hundred
I mean, if
extra
he wa- I
dollars
mean,
in
if
the
he wants
proposed
to, like,
budget if that was what
nail
was
his
needed
point,
to
he could
complete
just,
the
like,
movie?
put all the
Like,
movies on the
he
screen.
can find the
doesn't have to
finances for this
fucking
level of CGI
list
destruction,
each and
but a
every one
JPEG is
out.
going to break the bank? To imply that you think they couldn't spare a few hundred on additional art is either purposefully dishonest
He really
or
just
is
said,
willingly
"Fuck it, we're gonna
ignorant.
go through his
And
entire
anyone who played
filmography
into
and
that
just
false
name
narrative
every
that this was
single
just, you know, the
fucking
little
movie."
old movie
Oh,
that
no, he
couldn't do no
basically-
better
he basically,
makes me
like,
question your critical
when he
thinking
was talking
skills
about Wes
as a
Craven
writer as well
movies
as your
and
just
trying to, like,
motives within all
nailing
of
the
this.
point that, like,
This was
his movies
released
are
on a
political
1,000
and
screens
stuff.
around the country
And he, like,
theatrically. For
basically
context
gave
on
us
the
the
number of
synopsis
screens
of,
that
like,
movies tend to
at
get by
least
their
10
size,
different fucking
Knives Out
movies.
had about 3,000 screens, and Uncut Gems had about 2,000 screens. So while it is on the smaller side, to pretend that this was something that is virtually impossible to watch legally and has no
Okay,
chance of
I-
making its
I
money
do
back is
understand
very
his
disingenuous.
point, but he
And
just
also,
spent so much
everyone
time
who worked on
driving
the
on it.
crew
I
of the
get
movie
it.
already got paid
I'm
for their
not
work.
retarded.
So
I don't need
not
it
seeing
well,
this
I am
is
retarded,
literally
but I don't
only
need it
screwing over the
spoon-fed to me.
production people in charge,
I was
who
gonna correct
decided
you
that
if
this
you
was a
correct
good
yourself,
idea.
buddy.
Our support
Thank
of
you.
art
You're a good
has to
friend.
be conditional. These things have to be a hardline issue. Just because they made a small horror film does not mean that they are automatically deserving of access to our money as audience members. And lastly, for
Yes, they do.
context, in my Courage the Cowardly Dog video, I had 4 excellent title cards made by the artist Dr. Graham.
Those are all awful.
So one more
I'm
than what
sorry.
the directors say appeared in Late Night with the Devil. And that cost me $50 each. We aren't
Okay.
talking about an insane amount
Why
of
does
money
this
here.
matter?
That is just the cost of a few tickets to your movie. If my YouTube channel, which as we just
Like, I
covered has
agree
been
that it,
failing for
like,
2 years
shouldn't
now,
have
can
costed
afford to
that
hire
much, but
artists, then I
I'm just-
guarantee you that a feature film production attached
What does
to
this have
shit
to do
that
with
is owned by
conservatives?
AMC could spare a few hundred for some
I guess
assets.
'cause AI
Let's
is
not be silly here.
inherently
Weirdly
conservative.
enough, Flying Lotus initially got mad at me for criticizing the film, saying, "Did you shell out a few $100? Do you know the right artist capable of making said
Also, I
imagery
love
for a
the
few hundred
twirl
with their schedule?"
grandstanding of,
There's no
"Well, I
nuance
did
in
it
this
the right way.
conversation
Look
at
at how
all. Y'all just want to
superior
gang
I
up
am
on
compared
something.
to this
Probably will
movie,
never make a
guys."
feature film ever. To which I said, I actually did pay a few $100s for the
Looking
title
Pheasant
cards to be made
successfully
by an
murdered a
artist for
fucking
my video
foreign
in
leader. Now
December.
we're gonna get
They
World
turned
War
out
II.
great,
Look
and
at
I
me,
was
guys, I
proud to show
fucking
them
did it.
off. If my channel can afford it, a movie production certainly
Jesus.
can. But that interaction, from my perspective, even though it started out a bit strong with heated emotions on both sides, became more
I gotta say something. I am very online brained, like super online brained. I spend most of my time on fucking Twitter, which is terrible for your mental health, but I do it anyway. Why is this man and I use the term man very lightly.
Why
Why does he only care about Twitter like it's real life?
Why did this
I mean-
disgrace of a human being? Why
For him, it
does he
is.
care? Why
Look,
does he care so much about fucking AI and movies and like the cost of AI? What the fuck?
Well, AI is like the big boogeyman, and I get that. I get the legitimate concerns behind AI, but like I can't like pretend that I give a shit about some random indie film using free AI thumbnails.
Is the random indie film that he's talking about even good?
Probably
I have
not.
no clue.
I don't think anybody watched it.
So it's like, I know nothing. I remember this controversy, but I know nothing about the film itself.
It seems, from what I'm understanding, Twitter got a hold of it and lost their fucking minds like Twitter does with everything. And this guy is the amalgamation of all of Twitter lefty side.
Yeah, this is the guy that like I actually saw a guy in the comments like on this very like video, and he's like, yeah, I'm a super left, and like I was like this, I've been like this guy, but like I see this guy, it's like I realize how insane I've been.
Hurting our
So
cause. Good job, buddy. Alright, back to it.
Headed as it went on. And I'd like to think that we ended in a good place where we still disagreed, but were no longer kind of adversarial to each other, and ultimately agreed on who the real enemy is
No
in
one
this
fucking
situation,
cares,
which is
just
the
move on,
large companies
Jesus.
pushing this kind of technology. We ended by sending love to each other, and that was genuine. I love his
You
work.
did what
I
now,
think that
Chief?
he's super interesting as an artist, and I really do respect him. All of this is about love and community. It's about talking with each other and working with each other and making
So this
cool shit.
random
The whole
interaction
reason
on
I'm
a
making this
Hellscape
video is because I
website is
want
about
people to
love.
think about
You know
how they
what?
talk with each other and how they engage in
I'm not
art
even
and
gonna
the
go there,
world
never mind.
around them, and how to show respect if people have issues with something. I think if we had broad education related to media literacy, a lot of these things wouldn't have to happen. Horror author Amanda Woomer said during this hot take, "This film has been at festivals for a year, which
That's
means
another,
production was
Twitter.
2 years
Oh
ago.
my
The
God.
AI debate only started last year. Prior to that, people were playing with it. By
This
our
shit
standards
just
today,
turned into
it's
3 hours
shitty. But I
reading
won't
Twitter
screw over
tweets.
artists from 2 years
Twitter.
ago. I'm still going." Nathan Botok said in response, "I
And 30
can't
minutes
stand
of
the
shitting on
art
Wendy
justice
Boone for his
warriors who have been
friend group."
crying about this. They are acting like the entire movie is
When did
fake,"
that happen?
to which Woomer
Chapter
responded,
4.
"And now they're going
I have
out
a
of
lot
their
of
way to
just-
screw over
he
a
was in
small
Dallas
indie movie
jokes I
that
wanna
lots of
make.
artists, writers, and actors did work on for the sake of 3 AI images that were then
Yeah, you have a
edited.
good
I
point
don't
about
see
there
the
about
logic."
Indigo, but were
At
you in
Little
Dallas?
Leah 78, who describes herself as a one-woman creative agency, full-time smartass, and harlot of horror, said to this, "Honestly, people don't understand how films are even made or the budgets that go into them, or that lots of people use AI in everyday life and don't even realize it. There's a time and a place for the technology." To this, I would
Exactly.
argue that she herself does not know how movies are made, because
love
in the
the
time before the
self-righteous
release, the
giggles
filmmakers
whenever
could
he
have very
thinks he's
easily
right.
read the room and changed the images after the backlash from the trailer, and they
And I'm
still
not
decided
saying he's
not
wrong,
to.
but the
Probably because
self-righteous
they knew
giggles
the
are
movie
really
would get
fucking
more
annoying.
attention if they left it in and caused a discourse around the film.
Again, he's-
Movies
it's
are
like
getting
this
tweaked
smug
all the
whining.
time in the final weeks up to release. That is just very normal behavior. And it was a deliberate intention to not do that here, probably for the attention that it brought to the project. And if it is a budget thing, again, if your movie can't spare a couple $100, then it either isn't a real movie, or you need to fire your accountant. Filmmaker Aaron Kuntz said,
the
"Indies
fuck?
rarely have the budget to hire multiple artists. It's usually 3 or 4 art leads that source everything. They're overworked and underappreciated. If over 2 years ago one of them used an AI image, that's not taking away a job. It's giving them time to breathe." Which,
Because that's like
I also think
his
is the
thing.
wrong way to go
That's
about
freaking
this.
awesome.
Like, let's pretend
Oh
that
my
we
gosh,
literally
it's already
don't
posted
have
this video
any
where I just
spare
cut
money
out all
in
of
this
him reading
scenario.
comments
Let's
and
say
tweets.
we're in
I
some
bet the whole video
bizarre
would only
deep
be
hole in
20
the ground in the
minutes.
middle of nowhere where no money exists. If I were in that situation on a very small
Bad
production
conservative
as a
horror movies
director,
in praise
and
of
my
Shouts,
art
but he
team was
doesn't
overworked,
retweets.
I would either find some free
let's
stock
say- let's
images
say
and have
for
some
3
fun in
hours.
Photoshop, or I would just
They doesn't
make the art
retweet your
myself,
comments.
or I would
Alright,
call in a
this 3 hour
favor.
and
And
20
if
minute
none
video
of
is
that
down
worked
to
out,
4 minutes and
I
13
just scrapped the
seconds.
idea.
No, that's crazy.
If it were, too much. There's so many options they could have done here, and all of this ultimately was done over a movie that
Dude, you
was
done
just
said
okay.
this shit,
I had an
man.
alright time watching it. There are parts that I would say were good, but it is a solid 6 or so out of 10, if that. A decent but very forgettable
why the
movie
fuck
that
do you
fails to
care so
deliver on
much?
its very
If it's
basic
that mid
premise,
to you,
that
why you
desperately was
care
in
so
need
much
of at
about
least
this
one
one
or two
movie?
more passes at the script before they started shooting it. I knew exactly what I
still
was
wanna
in
know
for
what
as
this
soon
has
as
to
the
do with
movie started,
conservative
and I could
horror
already tell that
movies.
the script needed some extra work
AI
badly.
is
When, at the
conservative, I
beginning
guess.
of the late night talk
Donald
show,
Trump
the host
made
only
AI.
tells one joke in his opening monologue before he moves on to sit down behind his desk to interview the guest. And the reason that is the way that it is because jokes are hard to write. And the writers either didn't bother to come
Trust
up with
me,
any,
we
or
know
they
jokes
couldn't
are hard to
actually
write.
come
You
up with
have
anything
failed
that was
at every
funny. Which,
aspect of making
if you're
jokes
going to
so
be
far.
making a horror movie about a talk show, then you need to actually have some
Well,
joke
writing
writing.
scripts
Because
is
without
really
that, you are
hard,
totally
that's why you
failing to
bring
emulate your
zombies
chosen setting.
instead.
The band never plays music despite
In
holding
fairness,
instruments. It commits
jokes
the
aren't hard
cardinal
to
sin of
make
found
or
footage
write
by
when
having
you're
actual
funny.
traditional movie
Sometimes
scenes
no,
done
he-
with
he
traditional
goes for a
filmic
review
style,
of this film
interspersed
now,
while they're on
that's
commercial
so
break,
wrong.
that breaks the foundation
Oh my God, he
of the
moved on from
form,
his talking
stuff like
point.
that. Visually at times, it was mostly fine, but everything else that they're trying to do reads as totally inauthentic. Compare this to how this same setting was achieved in Miss Maisel, and you can see what I'm talking about. And I know that I'm comparing two different productions that had wildly different
Fuck is
budgets
Miss
from each
Maisel?
other. But you should really write for the money that you think you're going to be able to get. Sometimes, shooting for the stars is a bad idea. To me, Real Takes on TikTok had the absolute worst take on this issue, funny enough, when he said, "This type of holier-than-thou bullshit is obnoxious on so
So
many
now
levels."
instead of reading
A very
comments, we're
particular
reading the
brand of
scripts of
Reddit
other
bro
people's
throwing a tantrum
videos.
right now over one AI-generated image making its way into Late Night with the Devil.
I
If
think
you're
the
going
worst
to
thing
say
of all,
that this is
no
a reason not to
tagging
pay
or
to support a
crediting
movie
the
or to not
original
watch it,
bullshit.
then I think what you're doing is very counterproductive. This is a low-budget, incredibly well-made passion project. You get a great low-budget horror film made with passion and you're going to cancel it because of your holier-than-thou attitude? When you boil it down, I just find this kind of discourse to be dumb, performative, and unnecessary. Is AI something to be aware of and keep an eye on as the years progress? Yes, absolutely. This could take away a lot of jobs from a lot of people, but this is not one of the examples to act so hurt about. By all means, go after studios and filmmakers when they give us schlock, when they throw trash at us and expect us to eat it up. But this
Why
is
are
not
you
one of those
laughing? This
times,
isn't
and
a
this is
bad point.
misdirected and silly rage. The film would end up making $10 million at the box office in its short run, and would be shown on Shudder soon after that, with the images
a
still
successful
exactly
movie.
as they were, unchanged, even though they now had millions of dollars to fix the issue. In response to all of this, and when asked if he intended to use the box office success to retroactively hire an artist to replace the AI-generated images, now that they had a lot of money, one of the directors, Colin Cairns, said, "I don't know. If someone higher up thinks that's the thing to do, we'll have that conversation." But the film is the product of a really grueling production, writing, the whole process, and we're very proud of the movie, as is everyone who worked on it, and it's resonating. This huge couple of weeks that it's had, we know it works. And to go and change that just because some people have been outraged, and I think outraged by some exaggerated claims and frankly quite a lot of misinformation and misunderstanding, I think no. I don't think that we should start caving into that. The film is a production of its given circumstances, and who's to say in 5 years' time there won't be something else that somebody has a problem with, and well, oh, we've got to change that. I think the film is what it is, and stands on its own 2 feet. Audiences mostly seem to be enjoying it, which is what we're in it for. Horror has a modern internal problem with conservatism, and fandom-based centrism that excuses that conservatism and reinforces its power. We don't have enough time here to do the entire
finally
history
getting
of
to
the
the
genre.
conservative
That would
thing?
obviously take a while.
Yeah.
And this video is already quite long, and we have more ground to cover
Quite
still.
long, it's
But
3
horror
fucking hours.
is
Not
an
even half- we're not
intrinsically
even
left,
halfway
punk,
through.
anti-establishment, countercultural art form that is primarily concerned with social issues and pushing boundaries beyond what is deemed acceptable by traditional, more conservative, polite society. There's no other way that you can rationally look at it and still exist within reality. Just about every major
That is
work of iconic horror has had a leftist message to what it is
retarded.
trying to say at its heart about the human condition. And the people and the tastemakers at the forefront of the genre pushing it forward from the very beginning up to modern day have always been transgressive artists, looking to express something that they otherwise couldn't in more mainstream outlets. People of color, women, and queer people have often found a home in the genre, where they otherwise might not have in other art forms. It is not a place for hateful ideas, and it never has been. Night of the Living Dead obviously tackled issues of race. The
Can you
Twilight
pause
Zone
it
did
for
the
a minute?
Yeah,
It's never been a place for hateful ideas.
I guess killing people isn't hateful.
I also want
Wasn't
to point
like
out
a
that
big thing with Nosferatu that he was like a Jewish stereotype?
I think so.
I'd like to point out that you paused at the perfect moment, as we can see here on our screen. Hitler is taking a massive shit.
This is everyone's reaction to this guy's video.
That's
Yeah.
me looking at this guy's face for the first time.
He made us all agree it was Hitler. No,
Now the real question is, was Hitler in Dallas?
Oh my god.
remember H.P. Lovecraft's cat?
Shut up.
You could say similar things about basically every big work of horror fiction. Like, this is just basic stuff. Horror 101. All the big names in the modern era of horror film, Romero, Craven, Carpenter, Hooper, Flanagan, Cronenberg, Lynch, Waters, De Palma, Barker, Eggers, Gordon,
You get
Del
it.
Toro,
Get Lynch's
Jesus
name out of your
Christ.
fucking
among
mouth, you
many,
piece of shit.
many others, are all moderately left in their thought processes when approaching story and how they're concerned with social issues
Lynch
within
isn't
their
even
films.
really a
Now, not all of them are
horror
communist
director?
left,
No.
but still, the argument stands that they're all pretty left to be making mainstream successful movies within America. Mary Shelley was queer, Oscar Wilde was queer, Lovecraft was almost certainly queer, James
What?
What?
What? Bro, what? We're rewriting history about Lovecraft?
What? I've never fucking heard that before.
What?
Oh yeah. Also, H.P. Lovecraft was also this guy who could also transform into a dinosaur.
Okay, now maybe he was, maybe I'm not discrediting that idea, but are we
But the idea that he could transform into a dinosaur.
sure? are we really trying to place retroactively place positive neutral accolades onto somebody who was very openly and disgustingly racist?
Who's been dead
Now,
for
I'll
fucking
be
hundreds
fair.
of years.
I have heard that Lovecraft was changing his mindset as he went on, but his cat. Okay,
Yeah.
okay. I'll be fair. I don't think he named his cat, but whatever. The
What
guy
did he-
is by
Wait,
all
what about?
standards.
Oh, what the fuck's this cat? Well, what the fuck?
Look up
Lovecraft and his
H.P.
cat?
Lovecraft's cat right now on Google. I'll keep it paused. I can't say it, or this video will get taken down.
Oh, you don't have to tell me now because I already can figure it.
It was
It's Mago's favorite
man.
word.
Oh my
plus
god!
man and man.
All right, hold on a second. I looked up a fucking football team. Hold on. Cat name. Oh my god. It's Spider-Man, but Helen not.
Look up was Lovecraft gay.
Hold on, let me look. I closed out of Google, but I will look at it.
I guess
Also,
we should do our due diligence since this guy clearly didn't.
All right, H.P. Lovecraft, gay. Speculated that he was secretly gay, but the salient feature of his sexuality seemed to be how indifferent he was to it.
Well, that sounds more ace than gay.
Who the fuck is Robert Barlow?
I don't know. Was the guy who made The Exorcist leftist, or was he?
I have no idea.
There's a Reddit thing on, and it would just. There's a link to a Reddit post. Oh wait, no, that's not even fucking H.P. Lovecraft. Never mind.
I don't know. I'm pretty sure you could find Christian, conservative, horror movie makers. I mean,
Yeah, there's a Christian conservative horror movie that just came out recently that apparently did pretty good.
Really?
Like, it was apparently a pretty well thought out and interesting idea. They did a little bit of end times fear mongering, but the movie itself wasn't terrible.
I love how he's like, oh yeah, well, is he gay? And he's pretty much gay. He got married.
That
He got married in 1924.
Well, to be fair, I'm trying my best to be as fair as possible to In Praise of Shadows, even though he doesn't deserve it. A lot of people at that time that were gay still got married.
Well, fuck him. I don't care.
Journalistic integrity. I love it.
Look, I just don't look that much into a director's politics and stuff, but I'm sure you could find plenty who, even if it's not seen directly in their movies, they still have their Christian values and whatnot.
Yeah, it's almost
Or
definitely.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't want to I'd look it up, but I don't want to drag this out anymore.
Yeah.
Let's
So
continue on with
whenever
the
I'm editing
bullshit.
the video, I'll might throw in some examples if I can find.
Okay.
Was queer, Bram Stoker was queer. The very foundations and grammar of the art were constructed by queer people about queer people and as an art form. It really only works when being
Remember
used
that,
as a mirror to reflect social
you can't be
issues
gay
about
and
how people
conservative.
of lower class are being affected by those with power. Horror can't really function when it's being bent into a tool that punches down. It's why Saltburn fundamentally does not work as a film, where we find these fabulously rich people who were living their best lives, only to have their undoing befall upon them by the hands of a weird little queer freak who buries into their state like a parasite. Horror is intrinsically designed to question authority and critique power, and does not work to channel cruelty. The very act of creating horror fiction has for decades
Does
been
not
an act
work
of
to
protest
channel
and
cruelty.
critique. For more examples, watch practically any of my other videos. We don't have enough time
No,
for it here.
I'll
It just
pass.
is
No
what it
thanks.
is. And from there,
I'd
we're gonna
rather
move
watch
on.
people
Folks
dunk on
constantly
your
talk
other
about the
videos.
political undertones of my videos,
How long
but
have you been
horror is an
recording, Justin?
unabashedly political genre that is concerned directly with issues facing the current society.
31
And if you're in the
minutes.
horror space and you don't
Okay,
regularly
so I've already
acknowledge this
wasted 31
foundation
minutes of
as
my
a
time
challenge
watching
to
this
power,
fucking
then I
dipshit,
just
so,
assume
that's
you're in
enough
it for
for
the
me,
money,
actually.
or that you don't actually care, or you're just really bad at your job. And if that makes you
You are.
uncomfortable or upset that I often do that in my videos, that's probably a good thing. This is the intended purpose of horror as a
What?
concept. It is designed to provoke, to question, to hold accountable, to breed and facilitate conversation.
fun of
So
It
he's
drives me
comparing
crazy to
his
see
YouTube
anti-intellectual
videos
stances
to
from
horror
people within
grades.
genre spaces who say, why can't a movie just be a movie? Why does everything have to have meaning or
I
stand
don't
for
know,
something?
man. I feel like
Can't we
when
just have
people
fun
watch,
anymore? The best horror
Friday the
is fun.
13th,
It does both. Fun and smart
They go,
are not
"Oh,
mutually
normally-
exclusive concepts to each other.
This
And it
this
has always
fucking horror
been that
film
way.
reminds
And it is
me of this one
crucially
insecure
important to
little YouTube
acknowledge
channel
that and
likes to shit
understand
on
our
everything
history
and
if you're
everything
going to
in
then
sight.
apply that history to the works of the
Well, I
art
was
form
gonna
and
say,
the
I'm
world
sure
that we
that
live in
there's a
today.
lot of,
If you are far
low-budget
right and
slasher
think that I'm
movies that are
wrong,
made
genuinely your
mostly
favorite horror
just,
filmmaker would not only hate the
Cool
things that you
visual
stand for,
serial
but
killer
chances are they
killing
probably
people.
also made a movie about
Yeah.
it. Now, on a
Show off
surface
some
level,
good
one could
kills
see
and some
horror
kills.
as anti-women or pro-violence or, kind of the things that I was accused of in the last chapter because of the nature of the art form. Which, yeah, all of that stuff exists. That's all out there. But I think if you're viewing the entire art form that way, that is a bit of a reductive and simplistic view of what these films are typically actually trying to say about how we should all treat each other as people. We have to remember that depiction in art is not necessarily an endorsement of what is being shown. I mean, looking at Lloyd Kaufman movies on the surface, you would think that they were practically directed by a Klansman. But if you actually pay attention to him as a person and as an artist, and what he's trying to say and the types
I'm
of people that he allows on
not
the
okay with him
screen, and
talking
also
about
the
Lloyd
people who are
Kaufman.
in his
I kind
direct
of agree
circle,
with
then you
you.
do start to kind of realize that Troma has always been kind of one of the most radical and progressive, nearly anarchist film companies, operating at that level within American cinema. A group that
Yes.
revels in bad taste on a John Waters scale, but similar to him, does so not out of hate. At least, not hatred of common people. I mean, just listen to some of these quotes that he gave in an interview in New York back
Oh
in
boy, we're gonna start
2001
quoting
with
again.
Roll Hannon on how Troma always approaches story as a
Oh,
company.
Jesus
We take the
Lord.
position that there is a conspiracy of elites, the labor elite, the bureaucratic elite, and the corporate elite. These three
Yeah.
elites conspire to suck dry the little people of Tromaville of their economic and spiritual capital. In the United States, labor leaders get salaries of $1 million or $2 million a year, while the union members are working like animals for next to nothing. thing. Government officials like the Secretary of State or the Environmental Commissioner, they put in their 3 years of service and then they move on to the big corporations where they make $10 million a year. It's all fixed. On top of that, they're just preaching to us. I thought it was important to start Terra Firma with some brutal moments, because to a certain extent, that is what American society is. Brutal. The reality of American life is constant racial and sexual violence. My movies are a reflection of that. From The Toxic Avenger on, we have been involved in fighting hatred and violence and the puritanical dictatorship in America. He then goes on to talk about how America is fueled around forming smokescreens of false issues, taking moral stances on things that politicians don't actually care about, so that they don't have to do any actual real work. Half the world is starving and we're having discussions about abortion. It's horseshit. None of this sounds like the words of a hateful man to me. Angry, yes, but not hateful. And there's a big distinction there, where hateful is the act of lashing out, undirected and uneducated, but anger is channeled positive energy. And you can feel that throughout Terra Firma, which is one of the most outwardly mask-off works of leftist horror filmmaking in the past 2 decades, which, if you've not seen it, you really should. And if you...
Can we really classify Terra Firma as horror?
It's horror comedy.
It feels like
most.
It feels like yes, I get the leftist takes. Don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying he's wrong about that, but it feels like a satire of horror at the same time, not actually horror.
Yeah, it's more. Yeah. Most of the Lloyd Kaufman films are comedy or more. I guess you can put that under horror, but it also like feels very,
It seems like a disservice to what trauma films are.
Well, it's like that's like a completely different thing than like a movie that's trying to fucking scare you.
Yeah. Because honestly, if you're scared by Terra Firma, something's wrong with you. It's a great movie, but if you got scared,
at most you could be like grossed out or offended. But it's like, yeah, those films are comedy. They're all comedy first.
Or as hateful or overtly negative or simple-minded, I think fails to recognize what it can do as a form of expression, criticism, and protest, and what it has always been able to do for those things. But when I talk about horror being left, what I actually mean is that it has historically been used as a tool most successfully by left filmmakers. Horror and film in general, like all forms of art, are merely tools that can be wielded by anyone to produce art and expression that can then be experienced by others. And often it is the case too that conservatives produce works of horror as well. It isn't something that only the left does. There's this dangerous myth that has been cultivated by the left that conservatives can't make art, that they don't understand people on a very basic level, that they're not funny. Norm Macdonald was a staunch conservative. David Zucker, who made Airplane, is a Republican, and has specifically made films for the Republican Party. John Hughes was a Republican and made Ferris Bueller's Day Off as a show of his idealization of what the freedoms of Reaganism could do for us all. Milos Forman, who made One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and Amadeus, was staunchly anti-communist. Sam Raimi, the director of the Evil Dead films and the Spider-Man films, is a Republican who donated to both George W. Bush campaigns and has been alleged to support Trump very much in private, but just doesn't talk about it because he knows that people wouldn't like it. Quentin Tarantino is a Zionist and lives in Israel. Roy Frumkes, who wrote the film Street Trash, has been accused of sexual harassment directed at his students for decades. I mean, hell. David Lynch said at one point, Trump could go down as one of the greatest presidents in history. A statement that he would later retract, but arguably as much as I love him, a great deal of his work does have some conservative values to them, even though he clearly believes in the spiritual nature and goodness inherent in the average human, something that Alan Moore famously argued once that people really did not like. Trust me when I say that conservatives are perfectly capable, just like anyone else, of being funny and learning how to produce art. Those things are skills that anyone can do. To think otherwise would be hopeful at best, but in practice is dangerous, and allows the slow infiltration of conservative beliefs into places that they should not be allowed, because it creates this shield that allows us to ignore their red flags. The idea that conservatives cannot make good art needs to be abandoned, because it leaves us in a position to where we underestimate.
What needs to be abandoned is the idea that conservatives aren't allowed to make good art.
So he's saying that, like, Evil Dead shouldn't have been made?
It seems that way. And nothing Quentin Tarantino's ever made should have been made. And Lynch is problematic.
Even though he was just like
Glazing him? Yeah.
he drags his fucking point on and he tries to hammer it in, but it still ends up fucking confused.
Their potential to spread their messaging. I would argue that despite the face of horror journalism and horror authors being more diverse than they ever have been, on the side of horror cinema, we are living through the past 20 years of being some of the most conservative in the history of the genre. And within horror cinematic fiction at large, this has been a gradual slow creep, as there's always been some figures producing art within the medium, obviously, who hold right-wing beliefs, but more and more, I will sit down to watch a horror film and be blindsided by what it is actually trying to communicate to its audience. And I hate that more than just about anything when it comes to film. This myth that every movie that is ever made that is either horror or is a small independent production should be immune from basic criticism that we would level at any other work of media needs to be abandoned for this reason. We do not need to support every single small movie. Horror people love to make fun of what they view as basic lesser MCU fans, with their bizarre vanilla culture worship and their crusade against Martin Scorsese. But then will turn around and basically do the exact same thing themselves, just on a battlefield that is being fought on a smaller scale. A mindset of consume, consume, consume without even thinking to question how the sausage gets made, just lacking any sense of moral fiber in their bones. A lot of them just genuinely have zero conviction most of the time. And there are films that I will never review here because of that, such as when I do my History of Werewolf Movies video, I will not mention The Wolf of Snow Hollow, because the writer, director, and star, Jim Cummings, has been very vocally in favor of AI-generated imagery multiple times. I don't think anyone should support his work going forwards, and this is the last time that I will ever publicly acknowledge it. Horror is a mirror. It is countercultural. It is punk. It is that way, and it always has been. But if we are using punk as an example, then to further that example as a subculture, they have always had to deal with Nazi punks trying to infiltrate their spaces and co-opt their style and language to try and distill a message of hate through their mouthpiece that it was not designed for. As a community, they have worked for decades to build a set of tools and understanding to deal with those issues internally. And I'm here today to argue that we should be doing the same thing within our horror spaces. But there is this...
Look, I get that Roman Polanski might be a pedo, but he still made some of the best works of horror of all time.
Oh my god. I think
I'm just saying, I don't...
there's a fundamental disconnect here that I don't think he sees. Punks were trying to root out Nazis. That the conservatives making horror movies are not Nazis making horror movies.
Okay, there's also the fact that, like, punk wasn't as inherently leftist as he seems to think, considering that Johnny Ramone, you know, from the Ramones, you know, arguably the first, you know, punk band, was a conservative. As was, I think John Lydon, Johnny Rotten is a conservative. There's several,
Yeah,
you know, conservative punk band.
yeah, but that's not Nazis. So I don't get
No,
his
no,
point.
what I'm saying is like punk isn't like as inherently leftist as he seems to think, and like different, like not all bands were even like political not all punk bands were political focused. Just a lot of it was, but it's not like you can like you can't just, you know, corner punk like that.
Yeah, I get you.
Logical issue that we have to get over first, which is that people are not willing to criticize others within the genre space when they are doing wrong, and are not willing to criticize aspects of horror films either out of social politeness, because it is a small community, or more frequently,
Well,
allow their
people
values to
criticize
take
the
second
use
place
of
behind their
AI
love of
images. They
genre,
just didn't
or
think that was
out of
enough to,
financial
like,
benefit. All three of these are an issue that we
completely
need to address
devalue the
because they
entire
allow
film
active
and,
harm
like,
to
all
be
the other
transgressed
effort put
and to be
into it.
continued. To explain this, I think it would help if we look at the film Abigail. That is not a conservative horror film, but the conversation around it helps to demonstrate this point. The film is about a group of hired goons who infiltrate the home of a wealthy businessman to kidnap his daughter to hold her for ransom in an abandoned mansion outside of town, where Group 10
I love how the chapter on conservative horror films, the only movies he's analyzed have been staunchly not conservative, even by his own admission.
Yeah. Well, horror can't be conservative. Okay, can it be conservative or can it? He's like, it's like he's saying that it's like inherently leftist, but then he's saying that some movies can have like conservative stuff in it. It's so fucking
begin to rise as they start to
know I'm
doubt what they have
stupid,
done,
but, like,
and they begin to
goddamn.
infight as they suspect that the mafia has sent a hitman to the mansion after them to retrieve the girl. And then near the end of the film, we actually learn that the girl herself is the hitman, and that she's also a vampire, who has orchestrated the whole thing, and the climax is her hunting the remaining team members who have to fight for their lives.
Sounds like
okay,
a dumb
so
movie,
the only
okay.
problem with this is that the
Yeah, I was
vampire
just
reveal
thinking
is
that,
shown
like,
on the
what?
poster, and is in the trailer, and is in the name of the film. You literally cannot know that this film exists without also knowing that it is about a vampire girl. This is clear in every aspect of its marketing. You don't have films named Laurie, Clarice, Nancy, or Sydney, but you do have films named Chucky, Frankenstein, Dracula, Megan, Leatherface, It, Jason, Freddy, and Carrie. If a first name
Movie
is
and they
ever in
call
a horror
Leatherface.
title, historically that is to delineate who the monster is in the film. Every single piece of the film's marketing did not care if you
Not
actually had a good experience at the movies or not. They just wanted your money, and that's an issue. Now, I promise that this video is not going to turn into a list of people who annoyed me on Twitter, but to explain this
It already
concept, I wanted to have to
has!
talk about Twitter for a short while longer. So, people, including myself, began to complain that Abigail was not fun to watch, because you already knew how it was going to end because you'd seen the trailer, which I think is a valid argument. Not all movies are ruined by spoilers, but certainly some can be. You don't watch an Ozu movie for the plot, but if the work is designed to be a
Don't talk
mystery,
about Ozu,
then
you
you do.
fucking fag.
Abigail has several references throughout to Agatha Christie.
Well,
It is
this
clearly
video's getting
designed for
taken
you to
down. Good
initially
work, Mango.
not know what is going on here. It is steeped in the aesthetics of mystery
Look,
films,
we've already
and showing
said
that Abigail
plenty
is a
of
monster in the
that far.
trailer would be like showing the mask reveal of a ghost face in a Scream movie.
Yeah,
or
but the problem is you're actually talking about somebody who's LGBT and you're straight. I could get
Okay,
away
in
with it,
my
but you
defense, I
can't.
forgot. I mean, I can just say I'm not straight. I really like penis. Justin, can you send me pics of your penis so I can jack off to your penis? You know I'm gay.
Sure, buddy. Hold on, I will send you a picture of my.
Also, I'm still not sure, like, what the point is he's making here with
Yeah,
Abigail.
neither am I. But hold on one second. We're committing to the bit.
Oh, okay.
There you go. Check Twitter. DMs.
Twitter. Okay, let me pull it up. Oh, that's a nice penis there. It's very, it's a lot longer than I expected.
more similarly, including Gabriel from Malignant in those trailers. It would ruin what is designed to clearly be a fun whodunit film, whose base appeal is not knowing what is going to happen next.
Okay,
But
I
Bloody
get that,
Disgusting
but what does that have to
podcaster
do
Trace
with the
Thurman
others?
came out and tried to stop people from talking negatively about the film, because fanaticism means that every perceived attack on the genre must be quickly snuffed out, saying, "Gentle reminder that the trailer gave away the whole movie isn't a valid critique, even if it is true, #Abigail." And this supremely got on my nerves, and I said, I mean, it's definitely a valid criticism if it makes the first hour of the movie feel completely pointless, because you know all of
I
the
mean,
things that's happening on screen
it's a
revolving the
criticism
crime
of the
family
movie,
don't
but
actually
not
matter
really
because you
the-
know it's actually a
not the- I mean,
vampire.
the criticism
No,
of the
to which
trailer
he
and the
said,
marketing
that only
of the
matters for
movie
your first
itself.
viewing. Do you like all movies less on a second viewing because you know what's going to happen? And I just want to ask, what the fuck are you talking about? That basic argument is saying that it only ruins the first time you experience the art, which is probably also the only time you're ever going to watch it. I really don't see a
Fuck
yearly
you!
rewatch of Abigail in my future. I only rewatch movies for one of two reasons. Okay, so the first is for work if I need
Fuck
to
this
revisit
guy.
something for the channel.
Oh,
but
wait,
in my free time,
wait,
I only
stop. He just says he doesn't rewatch movies,
Yeah, apparently.
and
How can you critically analyze a piece of media if you don't rewatch it?
well, he only does that for work, I guess. That's
Oh.
That's so fucking weird to me that he doesn't rewatch movies. I mean, I
This-
know a lot of people would only watch like a movie like that once, especially if it's not like something great. It's just like, look, I get the argument, but it's also like, just don't understand how we even got here at this point.
So fucking dumb. This
That's fucking really weird.
this human being is very, very dumb.
He broke my brain. I can't even. We're not even fucking halfway.
If I really like a movie in the first place, and if an advertising campaign is so bad that it ruined the initial watch and put a bad taste in my mouth, why would I ever then go back to experience that again? 20 years ago, when I was a kid, I loved the series of Unfortunate Event books, and my mom took me to see the movie when it came out, and kids were yelling so loudly in the theater that you couldn't even hear the dialogue, and it ruined the experience for me, and I never watched it again, despite loving the books. And I still today remember what a negative experience it was watching that movie in the theater. You don't develop a fan base and years of dedication to your work of art if your marketing ruins the initial reception to the film. The second watch is...
So kids screaming in the theater is the marketing of the film? Is that what he's saying, or am I misunderstanding?
It's not what he's saying, but it's still like a stupid thing to say. Like, I had a bad experience like watching this movie in the theater, so I don't want to watch it ever again.
But then
I don't
he
know, I feel like
immediately
if
says the marketing has failed.
Yeah, well, he's also he's basically saying that like your like experience, like these things can like these initial what's the word I'm looking for? Your like initial experience with the film can like ruin it.
Okay, let's
Fucking none.
let's have a little bit of lore. We're gonna go back in time through Justin's history a little bit. It's short, don't worry. When I was a little kid, I vividly remember the first time I went to the movie theater. We went to see the movie The Indian in the Cupboard.
Yeah.
Some woman with a big hat was in front of me, and I couldn't see the film. So I could only see the sides of the screen. I couldn't see what was actually going on in the center of the shot.
Yeah.
That was generally a very bad experience for that movie because I couldn't actually fucking see it.
Yeah.
It's still one of my favorite childhood movies.
Okay. I don't entirely understand you. Could you like, read me a few Twitter comments? Maybe,
Well, you see, let me go on an hour-long rant using Twitter comments to back up my point.
You also you need to tell me like the entire plot of that film because that's extremely important to me understanding your point.
I honestly can't because I haven't watched it since I was like 12. I remember that I absolutely adore it and it was one of my favorite childhood movies, but the only thing I remember from that movie is when he put the toys in the little cupboard thing, they came to life.
Yeah. Too bad you can't rewatch it.
But then again, that movie's probably problematic because it uses the word Indian.
Oh, fair.
defined
Well, they
by
should
the crucial
remake it, but it's an actual Indian from India.
No, just rename it the Native American in the Cupboard.
That totally rolled off the tongue.
experience and impressions the movie made on us. Watching a movie for the first time and watching a movie for the second time are two drastically different experiences, and you are doing those for extremely different reasons. Trace then tried to argue that it isn't fair to judge the film based on its horrible marketing campaign, but it totally is.
Okay, so that movie came out when? Like a couple years ago?
I didn't see.
I think he said that it came out a couple years ago, but I want you to look at the screenshots.
from an hour.
This motherfucker has been saving these screenshots for most likely a couple of years.
If that's true, that is. I mean,
Okay.
that says a lot.
Let's. Oh shit! Hold on. Okay. Let's do a quick check.
I'm saying it. I mean, good portion of this video was about a fucking video he did 2 years ago.
2019.
So is this?
And he saved these screenshots since 2019.
I mean, I guess we'd have to actually find these screenshots and see if it could just be like, a recent ones that he dug up, or maybe he just found I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if he really has been holding on to them.
I can just give me 1 second because this is gonna itch at me.
Yeah.
Trace.
But that is annoying when movies they go through the whole film or spoil the plot, because that's been a big thing. But it's also that's a bigger issue. With what this guy said, the marketing team, than the actual movie itself. And I do get I hate spoilers. I get them souring the first time experience. But I'm also not sure what this has to do with everything that came before it.
Yeah. Okay, I can't find anything, unfortunately, but just glancing at his account, it doesn't look like anything was discussed about the movie Abigail recently. I could be wrong, but just the idea that he possibly held on to these tweets for years is just kind of pathetic.
It's hilarious.
You're not wrong.
It isn't fair to judge the film based on its horrible marketing
Also
campaign,
nice,
but it totally
Majora's
is.
Mask.
The film and movie theater do not exist in a vacuum outside of the realities of time and space. I cannot,
can't tell if
through
I'm
sheer
having a
force
hard
of
time
will, forget that I was
following,
bombarded
just
with these
because,
ads when I
he's,
watched the film.
you know,
The trailers,
all
the
over
poster,
the place,
the
or
Blu-ray
just 'cause I
box,
just
and
don't
every
care.
aspect of the delivery of the art are all
You've done a
singular
very bad
pieces
job
of
making
the
me
art
care.
itself. They are intrinsically
even with the
connected
stuff
to
I
each
actually
other.
agree with.
Trace then tried to
This is a fundamental issue of writing. I love this style of video where people will just talk at the camera for a couple of hours about something that they're passionate about.
Yeah.
I will stay hooked on this exact format for hours without any issue. This is a fundamental failing of his ability to write a cohesive script.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this is all of his videos. I'm not saying that. It could be just that he was so blinded by anger and the vitriol that he holds in his soul that this video came out as a psychotic ramble.
Yeah,
But this video is a failing of bad writing.
it is.
that I was wrong by sending me a tweet from horror filmmaker Ted Gagan, whose work I do like, and I've said that to him. But he said, makes me think of the very first trailer from For Dusk Till Dawn, back in '96. People said it gave away the second act twist, and Rodriguez replied, great, now people will know what you're in store for. To which, I would just have to say that just because someone dropped the ball 30 years ago does not mean that we have to stand on ceremony and continue to drop the ball in perpetuity. We can do better than this. Both Abigail and From Dusk Till Dawn absolutely work better as films if the people watching them do not know that they are secretly about vampires. The scripts are clearly intended for that to be a surprise. That is a horrible argument that does not make sense. I genuinely think that any filmmaker who made a mystery film would protest behind closed doors if the advertising people tried to show the reveal of the mystery itself in the trailer. I mean, really, what are we doing here? I used to work in film market research, often on the advertising end. This is objectively a bad advertising campaign that only works in the short term for a small amount of initial money. But
Okay,
burns
cool.
customers
What does this
once
have
they
to do with
realize that they have been
conservative movies? That's
had.
the name
I
of your
genuinely
video and
believe
the name
that
of
you
this
could cut
chapter.
several different types of trailers for this film that don't even hint that it is about
Because the bad
vampires. That would have
marketing
still
is
helped to build a loyal fan
conservative
base. And if you want a
issue
good
in his
example of
eyes.
this, just go watch the trailers for Malignant and Barbarian. They both had great campaigns. Both are monster films that do not have the monster even hinted at in the trailer, and makes the Abigail advertising team look like total
You
amateurs.
just spoiled
BJ
them for
Colangelo
us.
came out in defense of the trailer showing the end of the film, saying, if they hit
I
it,
like the
Universal
idea of
has to
somebody,
bank
like,
on people
watching
showing
this
up
and
for a
they
movie
didn't
about a
know
little
that
girl
about
being
those
kidnapped
films,
and
and now
held
they just, like,
hostage.
had a
There could have been a
spoiled.
tease that there's something more to her, but that's a big risk for general audiences who already assume the worst. Like, oh no, won't somebody think of poor Universal, whose music division alone has a market cap of $53 billion. Their music subsidiary is
No, you. That's not the point of the tweet. I can't believe we're going over fucking tweets. The point is that Universal cares about money, not please think of the billion-dollar company.
I didn't even just see the tweet. He's just. What did the tweet say?
If they hit it, then Universal has to bank on people showing up for a movie about a little girl being kidnapped and held hostage. There could be a tease that there's something more to her, but that's a big risk for general audiences who already assume the worst. That's not in defense of the poor company.
Yeah.
but that's a big risk for general audiences who already assume the worst. Like, oh no, won't somebody think of poor Universal, whose music division alone has a market cap of $53 billion. Their music subsidiary is literally the largest music company in the world, and it is just a portion of the larger Universal brand. But they had
I
no
love how
other
this
option
video
other
is
than
more
to
a hit
ruin the
piece
movie
on
that
Joe
filmmakers had
Nobody
carefully
on
spent
Twitter
years
than
of
it
their
even
life
is on
putting together.
Windigoon.
They just had to do it. By the way,
Yeah.
Abigail ended up making $10 million in its opening weekend. Do you know what else made $10 million in their opening weekends? Barbarian, Thanksgiving, and Talk to Me all made $10 million or so in the first weekend. The first Omen and Renfield did 9, Evil Dead Rise did 24, but that shouldn't really count. And none of these gave away their
Why
entire
shouldn't it
films and
count?
instead coasted off vibes, fun energy,
know.
and confidence. There is
See,
zero
see,
evidence
he
that
had
the
to
Abigail
keep this-
trailer
his,
and marketing campaign gave
script,
them
you
any
know, as
advantage
thin as
over
possible.
similarly sized horror movies.
And, you know,
Malignant
keep
did
out
not
any of
make
the
$10 million on its
unimportant,
weekend, but it
you know,
also came out in
points.
2021 and was still affected by COVID. And even then, it still made $5 million. There is no logical argument to be made in defense of Abigail's marketing team. And so to do so is only out of a blind defense of all things horror. And also, the very next day after our interaction, Trace tweeted about the new film titled The Coffee Table and said, "Hands down one of my favorite recent viewing experiences because my jaw was on the floor for most of its runtime. Go in blind. Go in blind." And this happens just about every time that you publicly make very light criticism of a horror movie. When the trailer for the new Strangers movie came out recently, I tweeted that The Strangers was never particularly good in the first place. And
Okay, I get the point that he's hammering at now. It took this long to finally fully understand and grasp it because he's that shit at writing. Elitism in horror films is probably a real thing because elitism in everything is a real thing. This idea that you're holier than thou and can't be criticized, that's pretty much everywhere. Every fucking group has their little in-groups.
But he's being elitist himself and holier than thou.
Yes.
So that's like a complete contradiction to his fucking attitude.
This entire video is a giant contradiction because everything he's railing against is something that he does.
This guy.
He's
This guy.
he's a silly goober.
He's a silly goof.
need to keep getting these things that are essentially just remakes every single time. To which Vicente Francisco Garcia, who we have talked about before here, said, "The OG film is a masterpiece." To which I said, I mean, that is using the word masterpiece pretty liberally. Also, why comment on my post? I've literally seen you tweet that you think I'm an idiot before. It's
Okay. Can you retweet so I can, or go back a bit so I can like see what this was? What this was? Okay.
Garcia, who we have talked about before here, said, the OG
My only opinion on this new movie is I think it's a bad idea to make something with the title, the chapter Stranger, was titled The Strangers Chapter 1, which looks basically like a worse remake of a movie called The Strangers that wasn't particularly good. And this guy goes, the OH film is a masterpiece.
The OG film. It's obviously a typo.
Okay. And he's upset that this guy likes that other film, or what?
Here's another contradiction that I'm seeing. Maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but this is a light criticism of his tweet. And
Well, it's not even a criticism, it's just a disagreement.
And he's throwing a bitch baby fit over it when he just said, like, 3 lines ago in his script that you can't talk shit about other people's opinions in horror without them getting defensive and turning into butthurt little babies.
Yeah.
is a masterpiece, to which I said, I mean, that is using the word masterpiece pretty liberally. Also, why comment on my post? I've literally seen you tweet that you think I'm an idiot before. It's not like I'm going to play nice with you. To which he said, I have literally no idea who you are or any memory of prior interaction with you. But it's funny to me how you have no issue bashing a film but immediately get wounded by someone disagreeing with your public post. We went on like that for a little while and I wasn't wounded. I really try not to take things like that personally, but I'm always
Liar! You are the biggest liar on the fucking planet!
curious about the psychology behind why people talk the way that they do. I've never really liked how that guy just talks to most people on a daily basis.
I don't let it get to me, but I don't like it.
I mean, I
Fraction
don't like
even
the way
ended-
this guy talks to his audience. Judge over this
Saying,
video.
oh my god, you are that guy. Yeah, I was rude about that because I did end up watching your video and hearing your side and completely disagreed with it. And thought it was a terrible, horrible, no good take. LMAO, copyright is there for a reason, good day, sir. Nothing is allowed to be criticized by these people who subscribe
Wait,
to
what
this kind
does
of mindset. And this fanatical pattern
copyright
of
have
blind
to-
worship needs to be
Wait,
interrupted.
what?
Because a healthy media relationship
I
can
love how
only
he
be
leaves
achieved
out
on a
huge
cultural
chunks of
level if we
context
all
and
acknowledge
expects
that
us to
nothing
know.
is
it's
beyond
n-
basic
It's
criticism.
not just me that's like confused there. I don't know what copyright had to do.
Yeah,
What?
he just left out a gigantic chunk of context.
Okay, so every other fucking time he like goes into like this painful detail, reading out comments word for word, but like when it actually like matters, he just skips shit.
And he still has that smug fucking look on his face the whole time.
And it's like he seems to think that you should be able to criticize something, but nobody can like disagree with you, which is like
But he's allowed to disagree.
so. This guy.
He's a
Guy
silly
here.
goober, man.
No matter how
He's
much
just a
we
silly
may or
little
may not
guy.
enjoy the
Are we?
work that is being discussed, I could talk for
We're
hours
not
about
even
things that I don't
halfway
like
through.
in my
Nope.
favorite movies. That doesn't take away from my base enjoyment of them. It causes reflection, and actually reinforces the things I appreciate about them as works of art, and lets us learn how we can interact with the art on a deeper level. Going back to that Abigail example for a second, the weekend it hit theaters, the most hated Hollywood Joe Russo said, "Horror fans, it's important Abigail beats Civil War this weekend. Industry analysts have been sharpening their pencils for weeks, ready to write that horror is out. But we know horror is never out. Don't let them trick execs into taking the gas off horror. Plus, Abigail rips. This is the kind of language that fundamentalist Christians use, and we are subjecting people to listening to it in relation to a moderately decent movie about vampire children eating people. I hate to make this comparison because it is so overdone, but it really is that kind of Orwellian fascist idea that there needs to be a constant enemy to fight to keep morale high among the common people. That
Like
every new horror...
Kind of like the enemy that you created out of Wendigoon and all conservatives.
Yeah.
Bravo.
movie is
I
a
like how
strange
he,
battle
like,
to
has
be
to show
won
his
that is fought
opinion
in
on, like,
secret for
every film
esoteric
he, like,
reasons. That there is a
brings
clear
up.
winner and
Yeah.
a loser. That all of this is exceptionally more important than it actually is. These people act like there's not been a constant steady stream of new horror movies made almost weekly since the 1950s. Horror is fine. It isn't going anywhere. It will outlast us all, and it is and always has been essentially always profitable. There is no battle to be fought, and there never was. Never has been. There will be a new horror movie released this weekend, and another next weekend, and another the
about the
weekend after
battle
that,
against
and the weekend after that,
and horror
and the weekend after that. I kind of think that some of these examples will be somewhat seen as a dividing line, and is going to be a cultural linchpin within the horror community of who actually is coming at this from an art perspective, and who is just about raw and ending consumption, and defensive companies that are so large they could buy your whole town and sell you for parts.
Who the fuck has defended
If you
a
go back
company
to
so
Trace's
far?
Twitter, the
Where
only
have you
time that
given
he ever
evidence of
mentions the
this?
Late Night with the Devil controversy is through mocking it, and making light of the situation, when he said during that ongoing conversation, "Would love for someone to make a themed calendar of the daily controversies that take place on horror Twitter. Like, seriously, what are we angry about today?" Although I
That's
couldn't
a
help
funny
but laugh
joke.
when days after our small argument he seemingly was still steaming about me and subtweeted me saying, "Can't decide if I loathe people bitching about trailers or about publicity stills more." Someone else said, "Please don't be subtweeting me, I come in peace about trailers usually," to which he then responded, "Wasn't about a specific person, just a general reaction to everyone's thoughts on that Superman still. Plus
This man is paranoid as fuck. He thinks everything is about him.
Yeah, he said he's subtweeting him, but that I don't see how is that a reply to him, or is that just a...
Subtweet is when
Okay,
you
also-
vaguely tweet about someone without tagging them. It is cowardly
Okay.
bitch behavior, but he's made it clear this
Okay.
wasn't about a specific
Wait.
person, and you're conspiracy theorizing that it was about me.
Okay, this guy, I see like 2 replies, so is this Trey Sermon? Who is this again?
As far as I can tell, he's a horror movie reviewer.
Is he a big one? Because he has like 2, I see like not very many likes and replies.
Let's find out real quick. It'll take me 2 seconds.
I mean, I guess it doesn't matter, but it's just, he's fixated on this guy for a while here.
Yeah, I understand. Traced Thurman. He's only got 8,000 followers. Like, legitimately, I have more followers than him on my dead account.
That's crazy.
And this almost...
this
how
is
many
close.
subscribers does this, in Praise of Shadows have? Like 500,000?
Yeah.
And he's complaining about somebody with 8,000 followers on Twitter this hard.
Does this guy have a YouTube channel?
Let me look at his bio. He's part of the Horror Queers podcast, which has 6,000 followers. I mean, I don't give a shit about numbers. It's not that important, but somebody this big punching down at somebody who's apparently this small, kind of pathetic.
Yeah.
I mean, one or two, like a couple of lines about it would be fine, but Jesus, he's really honing in on this. He is coping so hard.
I know.
feelings to everyone complaining about these spoilers in the Abigail and Trap trailers. From what I can tell though, I'm actually the only person they got mad at over Abigail. Then, several days after that, I think he was still mad at me and tweeted again, "Wonder how the marketing for Carrie would fly in today's spoiler-adverse culture." Okay, so, keeping with Late Night with the Devil. Tananarive Due said about the film, "Late Night with the Devil is immersive and irresistible. It's the kind of horror movie that climbs into the car with you for a ride home and slips under your covers. And David Dastmalchian, his performance is the star turn horror fans have been waiting for. Not once does she mention any of the conversation happening around the movie itself, because that would go against the general narrative that horror is thriving, needs protecting, and does no wrong. Just like Cody Leach ignoring the Spacey situation entirely in his review of Mad Monster Con. Within hers, she's totally sidestepping the important conversation about AI being used, which is bigger than the movie itself. She tweeted this the same day that everyone was having this conversation about the film's use of AI imagery,
Wait, how is
and
this
not
related to
mentioning
what he
it
was
is a
just talking
deliberate
about?
decision on her part.
not?
Centrism that is being done in the defense of horror, that is allowing conservative harm to be perpetrated. Mick Garris did this as well, posting essentially the same thoughts without ever actually addressing any of the problems surrounding it as a work of art. But that isn't all that surprising to me because his podcast took NFT sponsorships during the heyday of all that, and even had NFT trading cards featuring pictures of him sitting at the microphone recording the podcast on OpenSea. Something that I think will forever, at least in my mind, taint his otherwise very impressive and interesting legacy. For one last example of this, Mike Flanagan in this time did the exact same thing. When someone asked him his thoughts on the AI issues surrounding the film, and all he said was, "My thoughts are that I think that this is an excellent movie." He deliberately ignored what their question was asking, but still responded to them so that they understood that he was deliberately ignoring them. At the end of every single year, there's an article published through some major outlet that collects the list of the so-called worst movies of the year. These are always extremely popular, and get their intended goal of making people publicly performatively angry and talking about them. At the beginning of 2020...
Kind of like how you're publicly performatively angry about shit that doesn't matter?
It was Variety with their list of worst films of 2022 that included great films like Bones and All and 3,000 Years of Longing, who had the honor of having that one that was quote tweeted roughly 1,500 times, having comments from the likes of Elijah Wood and Dan Slott. All in all, a pretty successful endeavor for something that probably took 30 minutes of real actual work. That they will, almost certainly repeat every single year to the same results. We all know that worst of lists are almost in every single circumstance critical malpractice. They're trashy, attention-seeking, purposefully contrarian, and clickbait incarnate. It is something that should be avoided in most instances, at all costs, and should not be given the attention or time of day. If nobody gave them any interaction, they just simply wouldn't exist. They're all made because they're popular,
Honestly,
and
that's
most
how I
people would
feel
rather
about
have
you.
their
We
internet
shouldn't even
points
be
dunking
doing
on those
this because
articles
we're
than
just
actually
giving you
having
attention.
them, not exist. But I personally don't believe that these things are necessarily wrong 100% of the time. The logic should not apply to art that is actively co-signing harm. And so, we're going to do a little bit of that here this time. Everybody who's watched me for a while knows that I love Stephen King and respect him deeply, but there's something that we do disagree on. In his article, Why We Crave Horror, he famously said, "We go to re-establish our feelings of essential normality. The horror movie is innately conservative, even reactionary. And I flat out think this is wrong." It is a quote that often gets taken out of context and used in bad faith, as you could imagine. If you read the entire piece, he is essentially arguing that horror is often used to set and reinforce the standard of what is seen as normal versus abnormal. We have the idealization of suburban white homes, and we have the representation of evil that is attacking it. That is essentially something that is based in tropes, and in that, based in stereotypes, which is an argument that can definitely be made, especially at the time of writing that, during the height of Reaganism and teenagers getting killed over and over again in slasher films. On a base level, you can see what he's trying to get to, and it isn't as radical of a take as it may seem on the surface, but I still mostly disagree. I do find it funny that around Halloween, conservative outlets will publish articles talking about horror movies that conservatives can enjoy without conflicting with their views. And I love reading those articles, because it takes a particular kind of skill to bend something so wrongly that by the end of the conversation it feels like we're talking about something completely different. I love art. And I particularly love how many different people can watch the same thing and come away with conflicting feelings and inspiration and ideas about certain works. That's what, makes all of this fun. But these are clearly so far off the mark they aren't even in the same ballpark or playing the same sport as the...
So you're allowed to have different opinions as long as your different opinions don't differ too far from mine. Beautiful.
I'm so fucking...
of us.
Again,
in their
he hammered
2014
in his
article
point
titled
to the point that it actually ends up becoming more confusing.
Yeah.
conservative horror films of all time. The Federalist actually tried to argue that Night of the Living Dead is one of the best conservative horror movies ever made. You know, one of the first mainstream movies to have a black male protagonist that ends with a definitive statement about how black people are treated by lynch mobs at the time.
I actually think that,
argue
what's
isn't
his name, or George Romero actually said that, like, that wasn't even the intent. Even though, like, I mean, I can't. Like, I mean, it's fair to say that you can see that in the film, but it's like the director himself said that wasn't like the intent. That was just a sort of an unfortunate, or not an unfortunate, but you know, a sort of like, you know,
A happy accident.
a parallel. It's like a parallel to like an unfortunate, like, you know, issues going on.
I like how he can retroactively assign meaning to things that isn't there just to suit his narrative.
Yeah.
word choice there, because if you actually read what they said, no argument is made as to why it is conservative. They just say that it's a good movie, and that's because they don't actually have any values, and they don't really believe in anything. These articles in general are pretty unhinged and give you a perspective on the genre that you never see in other spaces, because they're wrong. But it also shows that these people have to force pre-existing art to
Fuck
fit
you and
into
your
their
smarmy
ideologies,
laugh,
because there's so
little
little
dick.
good art that reinforces their abhorrent beliefs. Breitbart did an article called 5 Great Horror Movies That Warned Us About the Woke Gestapo that includes They Live, which John Carpenter himself has said is a movie about Ronald Reagan. On another list, they talk about how good Jeepers Creepers was, because of course they do. They also praise Frailty for being a pro-Christian movie about a man who's on a serious mission from God, which, if you have seen
What the hell is
Frailty,
wrong with Jeepers Creepers? It was a fun movie. The director's a piece of shit.
I'm assuming that's what he was like, you know, implying.
is a very funny thing to say about that movie. But there's always been this thing that I've encountered more and more in recent years that is becoming more of a growing problem among modern horror releases, that I finally decided I wanted to publicly talk about it, which is this kind of anti-horror horror movie, where you sit down to watch a film and you get tricked into watching basically a conservative propaganda think piece that is cloaked in the cinematic language of a traditional horror film.
Are we
But
actually
you have no
getting into
problem
bad
with-
conservative horror movies now?
That's fine. Yeah, that would be nice. But I find it funny that it's a problem when conservatives use the medium as propaganda, quote unquote. But when the left does it, it's fine. It's inherently leftist, and it's okay for them to use it as a means to propagate their message. But when the right does it, oh.
Well, that's because conservatives are all evil and they shouldn't be allowed to exist.
One that does not align with the values
more
of
than halfway
outsider
done,
horror
I
art
think.
that you would expect going into it. Anybody who takes the form of horror cinema and then contorts it in a way to trick the audience into being exposed to a conservative theme that they believe in and want to share in their art is being purposefully disingenuous to the very reasons that language exists in the first place and was created. These tools were not made to be used in a way that argues that the very people who created them don't deserve life, freedoms, and dignity. And this has been done many times before, and sometimes has been done quite successfully. Most famously, I would argue that The Exorcist has a very conservative bent to it. It is literally a tale of the American youth being corrupted, and then only saved by the establishments that we are told are here to protect us both physically and spiritually. That doesn't stop it from being an incredibly well-made work of art, though. It just needs to be viewed,
Yes.
appreciated, and critiqued within the political and cultural space that it was made and exists in. And you can basically say the same thing about any good horror film that has a major cop protagonist character. Near Dark is another example of an amazing work of horror that is at its core deeply fascist. A movie can be exceptionally fun, bombastic, and very well made, and still have that be true. In fact, spectacle is a huge aspect of fascist art. It tells
Wait, so conservative movies can be good?
Well, yeah, it's like you said, yes, they can make art, but I'm guessing he's saying that they can be good, but then that's also a bad thing?
This man needs to take some writing classes, and if he has already, he needs to get his money back for the failed classes.
story of Caleb, the very picture of the idealization of the American youth. He is the son of a farmer, and the family live off of the land, until one day Caleb decides that this life is too small for him, and he runs away with a group of nomadic queer punks who end up being vampires, who turn him into one of them and initiate him into their way of life that is hidden away in the shadows. He is only cured of his vampirism, which is merely a stand-in for sexual proclivities, when the lifeblood of the symbol of the American conservative traditionalist message is injected directly into his veins, where he then wakes up from this haze of a cloud that he's been trapped within, to realize how wrong he has been, and then he and the farmer team up to go hunt down and kill all the vampires. There are plenty of liberal figures within the pantheon of horror that help to prop up conservative values, or are just outright causing harm that still produce quality work. Again, I love Stephen King. I will always be thankful for him to help me on the path to loving books, but at the same time, he sits at home every day for weeks tweeting about Trump in trial. But then the day after the police siege on Columbia, he was totally radio silence. Earlier this year, he tweeted, "I'm not worried about AI because I got my mojo working," which is the epitome of the Republican "fuck you got mine" attitude. A billionaire telling you that there's nothing to worry about because he is personally going to be fine. Francis Ford Coppola made one of the best horror films of all time with Bram Stoker's Dracula, but also was the financial backer of Victor Salva's Clownhouse in 1989, where the star of the film, Nathan Forrest Winters, was raped by the director. Coppola would later say, "I didn't know of anything improper going on, although I witnessed some things that caused me to raise an eyebrow. Only in retrospect did things really add up." You have to remember, while this was a tragedy, that the difference in age between Victor and the boy was very small. Victor was practically a child himself. Victor Salva was at the time 29. Nathan Forrest Winters was 12. According to the Los Angeles Times, just before Salva went to prison, he spoke to Coppola, who told him that the experience would have value. Francis said it will make you a better artist, Salva recalls. He left out one important part: if you survive it. After prison, Coppola gave Salva a loan to help him get re-established, and I've read multiple times that he has been alleged to have personally sued Nathan Forrest Winters, the 12-year-old who was raped under his watch as a producer, for breaching his contract and publicly talking about the incident which harmed the box office returns of Clownhouse. After prison, Disney would
tangential relation because it's directors and stuff and actors, but what does this have to do with the art of the movie and the undertones of that art and the themes?
He's like got so many fucking points he's trying to make, and he doesn't know how to make all of them in a way that's cohesive.
Yeah.
hire Salva to direct Powder for them in 1995, and the Tampa Bay Times reported. A company insider said Disney was concerned because a beautiful movie was being overshadowed by the controversy, adding, "We don't do witch hunts. We're not the CIA. And we don't do security clearance on people. People here are judged by their talents. We're not judging their personal lives. There are lawyers in courts that do that." Salva was allowed to make 7 more films after this, most of them horror because of the industry support provided by Coppola. And then, there's the whole recent story of his behavior on the set of Megalopolis. But the thing is that, either despite their conservative leanings or connections to prominent figures who have caused harm, some of these movies can range from being pretty good to great iconic films.
These people are shit. They also happen to be conservative. That means all conservative people are shit. Bravo. Excellent point.
Look at it in a vacuum, I do have to admit that at least the first act of Jeepers Creepers is technically well made. I think it is fair to say that The Exorcist is objectively a culturally revered film that is also quite good. It stands for an artistic merit in cinema beyond just what its baseline is saying. But the same cannot be said about the later exorcism subgenre that would spawn from this movie's success, that all to some extent have that lingering conservative leaning established and canonized in The Exorcist, with the worst that I've ever seen being the recent Pray for the Devil. Everything about this film is awful. I think it is my least favorite horror movie that I have ever paid to watch. It tells the story of a nun named Sister Anne, who is given the rare blessing by the church to assist in exorcisms, and uses the vague visual language of feminism to actually tell a story that is strongly anti-women's rights, as it uses the monster and metaphor of the devil as a means to preach an anti-abortion story. As the demons are able to enter these women, who either had abortions or gave up their children for adoption, by literally moving into their stomachs and making them appear as if they are pregnant, using their sin of abandonment and killing their unborn children as a catalyst to infect them with evil. The devil in this film is only really interested in women, who made these decisions for themselves. And this movie is very goofy. From one of the male priests in the few shots having a clearly visible neck tattoo, down to the girl boss kind of ending, where she doesn't have to wear her her nun's habit anymore, and gets to wear robes like the men. Everything about what it is doing on a narrative level is extremely conservative coded, and that was a deliberate choice. You don't have to do that. One could look at this year's The First Omen, or Immaculate, to find examples of demon possession movies about nuns and about pregnancy that are both extremely progressive in what they are doing. The setting of being in a church does not necessarily dictate conservatism, and is something that should be dropped from future exorcism movies.
Wait, what should be dropped from future exorcism movies?
Any type of conservatism. Using the coded language of conservatism in the narrative of the movie.
Well, but most exorcism movies are going to involve, like, the church, which I'm assuming he considers inherently conservative.
I mean, I consider the church inherently conservative.
So, exorcism movies shouldn't be made, or they shouldn't involve...
They shouldn't involve conservatism, because 2 movies that he liked didn't involve conservatism and were good in his opinion.
Well,
Therefore...
Well, he says The Exorcist involved conservative, and it was quite good.
Yeah, I love the reluctance to admit that a movie is good.
Yeah, I like that reluctance because it says it's it's a movie. Like not everybody has to think it's a masterpiece, but it is considered a masterpiece, and it's just got me wondering. Okay, what are your favorite movies? Does this guy have a letterbox? What is his favorite movies? It seems like in general he's afraid to call anything like a masterpiece.
Yeah.
Because it's like, somebody can go, well, it's not that good, or it's like there's just like this reluctance to like say anything is like good. Even when he was talking about like Wes Craven, he was like very critical, or like said his like issues with him and stuff, which is fine. But it's also he just comes across as he's afraid to like say any one thing is like just great.
This man has a lot of hate in his heart. You can tell.
And he's
a goofy goober.
Yeah.
Don't Die is an example of the kind of film that can become conservative by being misguided in how badly it is handling its writing. I actually do like this film a lot more than the average person, I think, as you ever really only hear negative things about it. It is a folksy kind of horror movie set in a small sleepy town that gets attacked by zombies. I actually do think that the film suffers because of the zombie stuff, because it is much better before they are actually introduced. Before we start though, it should be said that Jim Jarmusch is obviously not a conservative in any way. To prove this for the sake of the video, I'll include this here, where he said in 2019, "The lesser of two evils does not appeal to me, and I don't like the two-party system anyway. I don't know why people aren't all over the Electoral College and this nonsense. Well, I do know why. Because it's the corporate media. What disturbs me now is that my friends who don't like Trump spend more time talking on Trump than the people who like Trump. Trump sets the content for the corporate media every day. And by corporate media, I mean MSNBC and CNN and Fox. They're all the same. It's just the Trump channels. I like some things about Elizabeth Warren. I, of course, like Bernie Sanders. I like what's-his-name, the governor of Washington State, who's the only really environmentally conscious one, Jay Inslee. And of course, I like AOC. She's too young. But I'm trying to stay away from it right now because the Joe Biden thing makes me deeply depressed. But with The Dead Don't Die, what he is trying to say is kind of so vapid that it ends up playing into conservative talking points. He's doing Romero zombies here through and through, but much more clunky than Romero ever did. When The Dead...
So if you're too stupid to make movies, then you're going to make a movie that's conservative. Is that what he's trying to say?
I don't... Well, I couldn't tell if he was trying to, like, defend him by saying that he's not a conservative.
Back to life.
But he's also,
the first
like,
thing...
it made him sound like a centrist.
Yeah.
But I can't tell if he's saying...
This
like,
man is so confused.
Again, I know we're stupid. And I know we're pausing the video a lot and talking through it, but
some of these points are so dumb that I have to, like, hang on them for a second just to process what he's trying to say.
I have trouble figuring out what he's even trying to say because it feels like he ends up going on like a tangent that's just like completely like separate from like what we were just talking about, a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
Them do is start playing on their cell phones and mumbling about the shitty Wi-Fi. It almost comes across as if your grandmother's Facebook posts were adapted into a horror film. Steve Buscemi's character, Farmer Frank, is a horrible racist who wears an altered MAGA hat to make sure that everybody knows that when he says "Make America Great Again," he's specifically talking about white people. And this is included in the film, but is never actually dealt with in any meaningful, specific way. Before he realizes that zombies are attacking his property, he impulsively shoots a black one in the head on his porch, without warning. But then he ends up dying the next scene, and the film has no interest in actually dealing with this outside of the basic presentation of who this person is. And it ends with a scene where
So racist getting killed by zombies is inherently conservative now?
Well, it's conservative because it doesn't deal with his racism, I guess. That's what it's saying. It doesn't like go deep enough into it, so it's conservative.
Oh my god.
Waite's character, Hobo Bob, who is a hermit who lives away from society because he dislikes us, and he's narrating about the empty-headed consumerist culture of America, while our main cop characters, who are the only survivors left in the town, are callously shooting people in the head that they've known for decades. And in a
We're callously shooting people in the head that we've known for decades when they're fucking zombies. So should they just stand down and die?
I don't understand
is-
how this is a conservative movie. He's making it sound pretty anti-conservative so far.
It sounds like the worst sin you could peg on it is it's centrist.
Well, I mean,
Maybe
for people like him, that's probably worse.
True.
say something negative about the police, but to me, I think that is kind of a generous reading, and my experience with it was that it was a sad and depressing film where we're watching a 70-year-old artist kind of flounder while attempting to and failing to write anything helpful about the current political climate, while at the same time kind of misunderstanding how zombie stories traditionally function. They/Them is a movie that I am fully convinced was only made because it had a clever name, because everything about this to me is awful, and is another example of a film that might have had good intentions, but is so weak in its delivery that it wraps back around into being a conservative horror film in my eyes. Like, even the name itself is almost making fun of people who put an emphasis on pronouns. It might not be deliberately trying to, but it certainly skirts that line. It is a slasher film that takes place at a conversion camp, and basically
So even if you don't intend on making fun of people who are non-binary, you're still making fun of people who are non-binary?
Was the people who made the film non-binary?
I have no clue.
I don't.
A slasher film that takes
I
place
guess
at a
what I'm-
conversion camp. That actually sounds kind of interesting.
I just thought the name. I remember hearing about it. I always thought like the name was funny. They/Them, because it's a good pun.
Yeah.
everything that you would expect with that concept. As a queer person, I don't really need the reclamation of gay conversion camps in films and works of horror. It has been a strange recent trend to me. There's been a lot
So you speak for all gay people now. Okay. Cool. Got it.
dramatized conversion camp works in the past decade. I don't really think that we need to depict people going through that and then standing up to their own oppressors in that kind of direct way. It worked once in But I'm a Cheerleader, but only by the skin of its camp 90s teeth. It is to me too on the nose as a setting for horror writing. You can build a horror monster that represents hate against gay people that isn't literally depicting the horrible things that have happened to us for decades. To demonstrate my point, I'm talking about metaphors here. If we look at another similar group, I think what Jordan Peele did in Get Out by building metaphor that stands in for different kinds of actions done by white people to and around black people is far more interesting in its ability to analyze small social actions than if he had just made an outright
That's just
movie
like
about the
your
Klan or
opinion,
neo-Nazis that was much more direct and heavy-handed in its messaging.
I did like the movie Get Out. I gotta be honest. It was a good movie.
No, that's fine. I haven't seen it, but it's just like so much as this is just like his opinion, literally.
Oh yeah.
It's like him saying like I don't think movies should be done this way.
Yeah, it's too on the nose for me personally, so nobody should enjoy it.
The metaphor that he creates builds a distance from the real-life events, to where we can talk about these things in a way that just works better most of the time, both in an abstract academic sense, but also as entertainment within horror itself. I think if we tried to think about these concepts more abstractly, we could come up with better material than just evil conversion camp man. Even from its base core concept, this is a huge mistake that ends up being the kind of movie that straight people would kind of expect gay people to make and enjoy. It more or less places us in their box, and ends up playing in territories of their language instead of our own, if that makes sense. I think a movie like Evil Dead Rise having casual trans mask representation that doesn't even acknowledge it, and just treats it as normal, and even goes so far as to allowing that character to be kind of a bit of an idiot, instead of handling them with kid gloves, does so much more good than the simplicity of a movie that has the obvious message that converts.
I'm sorry, I was just blindsided by the fact that he had a nuanced take that I actually agree with.
Yeah, but it also seems like earlier he was like he was saying like they should go into the detail is what it.
Yeah, I expect everything that he says to be a contradiction at this point.
Which maybe it's not a contradiction of like what he's thinking, but again
The writing.
he just yeah. Because again, it's hard to like. It's like there's so many ideas here that are just so separate.
Yeah. I agree with him on one thing. This Jesus Christ, this video would have been better if there was some more time in the oven. It would still be a shit video.
Been several videos because it's like he's making like too many fucking points for him to handle.
Yeah. It still would have been a shit video, but if it would have spent more time in the oven, it would have been better than this. This is a fucking mess.
Bad and shouldn't exist. This one is not a huge offender, obviously, but has somewhat bothered me since it came out, specifically because it was made by Blumhouse, which we will get into here in a bit. It is another example of Jason Blum profiting off of minorities while working against their values simultaneously. And overall, it just feels like the kind of useless statement that a politician would put out that says something that everyone already knows and agrees with, and does absolutely nothing in any radical way like a horror film dealing with these issues should. You also have horror movies that argue that the very act of making horror is a bad thing and should not be done, because of its real harm in the outside world, which can be done in films that otherwise are good, such as Scream, or can be done very badly in bad movies, like Random Acts of Violence, a 2019 film by Jay Baruchel about a comic book artist named Todd. He has created the #1 selling comic book in America called Slasher Man, which honestly should really tell you about how badly this is going to go if they're trying to pass off that a book called Slasher Man is going to not only sell well, but also outsell the biggest titles from Marvel and DC. Which, it's ultimately a small thing, but I hate when a film has so little respect for an art form that it is trying to depict, that it doesn't even do basic research on how this fictional work of art would fit within the actual landscape of our world and the industry.
Well, it's a fucking movie.
The biggest comic book in the world, to my knowledge, is called Superman.
Well, he's saying that it's because like it's a slasher thing, and it's I guess a campy slasher-based comic book, which I could see, that wouldn't do well. But again, it's kind of like.
But he made.
I haven't seen this movie, but I'm assuming that it's supposed to be kind of tongue-in-cheek, and it makes me think of like watching Orgasmo.
I've never
and
seen
complaining, that. Well, and Orgasmo, like the movie Orgasmo. Within the movie Orgasmo, it becomes like this box office like success, one of the highest grossing movies of all time. It's a fucking cheesy ass porno.
That sounds hilarious.
It is fucking great.
Talking about. Jay Baruchel got relentlessly made fun of online when this came out, because while doing press for it, he was insinuating that this was going to be his big turn into directing full-time, and that most horror movies are bad, and that he was here to make one of the really great ones. And then the film comes out, and it's just about how horror is awful and anyone who likes it is a degenerate. And now, he's hardly worked since then. Basically, the film is about how an obsessive fan begins to kill everyone in Todd's life.
Terra Firma is, about how horror film is bad since you got people getting killed on,
on a horror movie set. Yeah.
Yeah. And just being, completely deranged.
important to him, in ways that characters are brutally killed in Todd's comics, basically arguing that these horrible things that came out of his mind have come back to haunt him, and that the horror community is filled with mentally ill freaks. Todd hates interacting with all of his fans because it disturbs him how much they are into the gross things that he creates. And in general, it is a very dumb business idea to make and then try and sell a movie to a group of people that you are arguing are mentally unwell individuals who are not properly socially adjusted. That seems like a bad move to me. And sometimes this happens where a certain movie is done so poorly that we just have to laugh at it. Never Feed the Troll from 2010 is easily one of the most inept horror works ever made, and is also one of the best experiences I've ever had in the theater. And it's a shame that it is basically unwatchable lost media now. It is up there with
all bad
Birdemic for
horror
its
movies are
confidence and how
conservative.
awful it is, and how often it
guess.
stumbles in trying to deliver its message, which is also bad. I saw
they
this
do
at a
make,
film festival
like,
and had
really
literal
shitty,
tears
like,
rolling down my face.
right-wing
Everyone in the
Christian horror
audience had an
movies.
amazing
Yep.
time. Genuinely, one of the best theatrical
there was one
experiences
called
of
The
my
Redeemer,
life.
and
It
it's
is a
like
horror film about a
Christian
preacher's
Saul.
wife being stalked
Oh my
in very
God.
funny ways online because someone learned
Wait, I've actually watched a movie that was basically like Christian Saw. The only difference was the mastermind killer was actually a paranormal entity. I forget the name of the movie though, but it was fun. It was stupid, but it was fun.
And the Redeemer, it was God, and he didn't torture anybody. He just kind of put them in these situations where they had to learn a moral lesson and shit.
That sounds dumb as fuck. I would love that.
The fucked up part is it had what's the wrestler's name? The Irish one. He was in They Live.
I don't know.
Roddy Piper. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
Roddy Piper was in it, and you
Okay.
can't understand a fucking thing he's saying.
she once cheated on the preacher and is going to be killed because of her infidelity. The IMDb reviews from the time, obviously written by themselves and their friends and family, declare it to be a return to Hitchcock suspense and thriller. If you manage to track this down, please preserve it somehow, because I really don't know if it even exists anymore. The footage that you're seeing is from the trailer that is still online. It is a classic of bad taste waiting to be discovered. I haven't seen this movie in almost 15 years, but I distinctly remember that there's a really good bit where the hacker powers her computer back on even though she unplugged it from the wall, at which point the entire audience howled with laughter.
That does sound funny as fuck.
Why are you doing this?
I kind of want to watch.
What you are doing.
See, this is why conservatives
It's
should
illegal.
make horror
I
movies.
will do something about it.
Dashcam in 2021 was probably the most mask-off modern conservative horror film to receive a release this wide. Coming
Okay,
off their
we're getting a
success in
conservative
2020
one.
with Host,
Sweet.
filmmakers Rob Savage and Jed Shepard partnered with a larger company to do a theatrical, spiritual successor to their low-budget streaming feature, about a found-footage COVID lockdown ghost story. The film stars conservative media personality and conspiracy theorist Annie Hardy as herself, as she flees to Europe to escape the draconian United States and their insane restrictions to the COVID pandemic, only to be dismayed when she finds that England is in a very similar situation as America and how they are handling the pandemic. The film took advantage of public spaces being mostly empty, and was shot in a very guerrilla-style method on real locations in 2020. When forced to wear a mask indoors, she writes "slave" over it in protest. As the film's story unfolds, we see Annie show off her favorite hat, mocks people by jokingly calling them essential workers in sarcastic ways, refuses to wear a mask in almost every situation, and gets into a confrontation with a restaurant worker when he asks her to put one on. She goes into a fit and starts breaking things that they own while yelling QAnon bullshit. The film presents him as being the unreasonable one in the situation. The comment section that is on screen at all times constantly uses slurs, including the word faggot multiple times. From what I can tell,
That's what you
neither
are.
Shepard nor Savage are actually
damn
queer,
it,
but I
Mango!
can't find conclusive evidence to say that 100%. But if they aren't, they really shouldn't feel comfortable
It's
casually
okay.
using that word within their
You're one
ranks.
too, and you're my
The hosts
friend, so I
that
get
she
the
is staying
pass.
with say they don't like the way
Okay,
that she is
that's
acting,
logic.
and she calls them libtards and leaves. To the camera afterwards, she makes several
Libtards.
negative racial remarks about her own friends. A stranger asks Annie to use her car to drive a very sick older woman to get medical help. Annie refuses to do this and calls the woman a human trafficker. She only accepts when she takes advantage of the situation and charges the woman a lot of money to drive. She casually mentions that the elite are using children to harvest adrenochrome. And believe it or not, this is all in the first 15 minutes or so of the movie, before the horror even actually
This
starts.
movie sounds
It is
fucking
an
hilarious.
exhausting experience.
I wanna watch
For a popcorn
this.
horror movie, Hardy's void of a personality really does take any
So that's
possible
like- so this-
enjoyment
that's
that
like
could have
the
been
message
found
I'm
here.
getting, is
I
that
never really
conservatives
use
can
this
make
kind of
more horror
language, but in
movies
her case, it is
because they're so
warranted.
unhinged
Annie Hardy
in
is
it.
a legitimately stupid person, and giving her a movie or platform to showcase her views from is dangerous. There's just no other way to.
I hate that fucking mindset. This idea that if anybody is problematic, they shouldn't be allowed to have a platform.
See, I think the opposite, because obviously they make some very funny stuff.
Not only are they worth laughing at, which is the best part, showing these bad ideas and giving them a public platform is how we make sure that bad ideas don't infiltrate our fucking society.
Yeah. Well, it's like you gotta, like, people I think it's important to, like, hear, like, bad ideas and see that perspective so you can, like, accurately, like, fight it.
Yeah. How can you have the tools to properly articulate why an idea is bad if you've never been presented with the idea before?
Yeah.
She is genuinely stupid, hiding behind an aesthetic, and should not be given a platform this large. At one point when talking about Trump with Medium, she said, "When everybody hates someone this much, I automatically like them, because people are idiots. Plus, people all kind of hate me for no reason. I think I'm good. I try to embody the teachings of Jesus. People hate Jesus though, and they hate me, and they hate Trump. Oh great, now I look like I'm comparing myself to Trump and Jesus. But I mean, I'm not and I am. I just want everyone to be happy, even though they don't want to be." The major problem with Dashcam as a work of art is that it presents Hardy as a person with no criticism at all, similarly to Farmer Frank in The Dead Don't Die. The eventual problems that face her have nothing to do with her being forced to confront her dangerous ideology. The sick old woman ends up being a monster for
it sounds like
largely
in the other
unexplained
movie,
reasons,
they just thought
besides
it'd be
some
funny
slight
to have him
insinuations
get
that the
killed.
workings of a cult are at
Yeah.
play, and Hardy and her friend
funny
have to
have,
kill
like,
it
a
and
mega
escape.
fag.
But at no point are these events actually tied thematically at all to the inclusion of her own
mega
personal hateful
fascist
beliefs.
loser
There are
get
times
killed.
where they are seemingly presenting her views
I
as
was gonna say
foolish,
fascist.
or that we should think all of this is funny. But there's no effort placed in the filmmaking or writing to demonstrate that this is supposed to be a work that is lampooning Hardy as a person, rather than reinforcing her beliefs. As the old adage goes, satire requires a clarity of purpose and target, lest it be mistaken
fuck
for and
that.
contribute to that
Fuck
which it
it
is
up.
intending to criticize. If you have a movie that is
that.
depicting a fascist, starring a real-life fascist who is basically playing herself, who is making a lot of money from this
of the
project,
best
with no
satire
clear
is the
substantial
shit that,
criticism
like,
of her views within the film, then,
don't realize
by
it's
that logic,
satire?
have you not just
Yeah.
made a fascist movie that both reaffirms her
I
views,
mean,
as well as having giving her a megaphone to
Tomorrow's
say them
teaching is
from? For some
satire
reason,
and,
people really
look
loved
at all the
Host, but this
fucking
movie was a
idiots in the
total
comments
failure
that
in all
can't
regards.
figure that
Funny
out.
that.
Right.
I think that with the rise of social media, we have had the
that's like as
unintended effect
obvious
within
as
the
it
genre
fucking
of
gets.
people who report on horror and write about horror, becoming closer on a personal level with the people who make horror media, and often take sponsorships and advertisements and free screeners and gifts to talk positively about the things that people they know personally have made. Some might call these things bribes. And I think that is a very gray area, where my personal position on the matter is that as a reviewer and critic and journalist, it is unethical to review the work or report on the doings of people that you have become familiar with on a social level. Now, this has always been the case to some degree. Film interviewees and journalists have always had a certain rapport with people in the film industry. Things wouldn't get done if that were not true. But rarely before the past decade has the line between professional respect and personal friendship been so blurred to this degree within entertainment publishing. And it is even worse within horror because the community is so small. It is a fraction of
I
a
mean, I
fraction
don't
of
think
the
it's an
pop
issue
media
as long as
landscape.
they're
And in a
upfront
world
that,
where
you
your
know,
own
they're
average
biased.
film journalist or critic can
fair.
become an online micro-celebrity in their own right, you have this dynamic where the media becomes a shield to those with power and money who may do things that are ethically questionable, or even if they don't do anything necessarily wrong and they just put out a lackluster film. I'm not trying to be a dick here. I hate giving anything a bad review, genuinely. I always go into art to try and meet it on its level, but just as an example of what I'm trying to talk about here, everyone in these spaces online tried to gas up It's a Wonderful Knife last year. It was even the cover story for Fangoria, and that thing was mid at best. Barely passable, and only saved by Justin Long giving a total weirdo performance. But if you listened to the buzz online around it like I did, then you would have thought that you were about to sit down for an instant classic, only for you to sit there and worry that you must be the one with awful taste. But the writer, Michael Kennedy, is well liked within the community, and used to be popular on Twitter before he left. And at least from my perspective, I just got to wonder that if this film existed within a vacuum of its own, would the response have been what it was? And this happens near monthly. There are probably at least 24 other examples I could have picked to talk about this concept with. I like and respect Mick Garris a lot, but back in 2018, people would look you in the eye and tell you that this movie with this effect, that is intended to represent a message given from the afterlife, was well done. It is a pattern of regular online behavior, and to find the actual good stuff, you've got to kind of train your ears to fine-tune out all the bullshit that people say in the review space. I really do love places like Fangoria. I need that to be clear. I have a stack of them next to my work desk, but also, it does have to be acknowledged that their primary goal before anything else is to sell you new horror films whether they are good or not, and are legitimately comfortable lying to you about the quality of a film for money. Places like that should be seen as advertisements first and foremost, and not as legitimate critical pieces most of the time. And I don't think that should even be a huge controversial statement to say. They spent one of their 4 yearly issues last year telling you how good Exorcist Believer was going to be. I purposefully have never made close friends with people who actually make movies, or with many people in the critical horror space, to be honest. Because in a lot of ways that would compromise an integral part of his job. If I knew Mick Garris on a personal level, I would have probably not been shameless enough to say that about his movie just now. I think to be a critic, you have to purposefully distance yourself from the thing that you are criticizing, and to not do so in some circumstances is questionable. There must be a clear delineation between you as the critic and the subject of the criticism. Remember just a little bit ago when I was talking about Tananarive Due, completely sidestepping the controversy of Late Night with the Devil in her short tweet review. Well, what I neglected to mention about that, which ties into this, is that about an hour later she also posted a picture of her on a couch with David Dastmalchian at an event for the film that was funded by Shudder, who distributed the project. And when I see that, how am I supposed to believe anything that she ever has to say as a cultural critic, if she is not engaging in good faith with the active conversation happening around a work of art, while also showing that she is close, or at least friendly, with the people who made that art? If she had acknowledged why people were upset with it, but said that she still liked the movie despite that, then that would have at least been somewhat respectable. I've done that tons of times. And I always try to acknowledge why an enjoyable work of art is also at the same time a harmful one, if I'm aware of the things that people are taking issue with. But she doesn't do that. She pretends it simply isn't happening. And taking a centrist, money-based position compromises her current and future credibility, at least to me. And it is okay to be friends with people who make art. I'm not saying that. It isn't a crime that she knows David Dastmalchian. But I do think it is ethically wrong to engage yourself in an ongoing public conversation as a public figure, if your own public position has been compromised by your personal connections. And every time this happens, I feel like I'm going a little bit crazy, especially because nobody ever really talks about this groupthink social media journalist and creator relationship psychology phenomenon at all. But everybody's gotta kinda think about it sometimes, right? Like, Brandon Strusnick is the only person I've ever heard talk about this, in at least a roundabout kind of way, when he tweeted about the controversy surrounding Late Night with the Devil. I feel like I'm losing my mind seeing the level of this poor little movie towards a film currently in wide release, with distribution on a pretty sizable streamer in a month, because people are saying it sucks that it used AI. Just say you dug the movie, lol. I love and respect all of you, so I'm really not trying to be a dick. I just don't understand being mad at folks not wanting to support it. Cast and crew are paid. It's out there for the rest of the not terminally online to see. I think it's going to be okay. I feel like we give special exemptions for shit we like made by people we like, and I'm not sure I'm into that. Again, I'm not subtweeting any one person. I'm just saying I, Brandon James Strusnick, disagree with the approach, but I'm sure we'll agree on lots of other stuff. As you probably well know, Spyglass Entertainment refused to pay Neve Campbell what she felt like she deserved to return for Scream 6, and as a result, she walked from that project, and did not appear in that film. In her statement, she would publicly say, "As a woman, I have had to work extremely hard in my career to establish my value, especially when it comes to Scream. I felt the offer that was presented to me did not equate the value I have brought to the franchise. It's been a very difficult decision to move on. To all of my Scream fans, I love you. You've always been so incredibly supportive to me. I'm forever grateful to you and what this franchise has given me over the past 25 years. The new star of the series, Melissa Barrera, put out a statement at the time that said, "We are all heartbroken, but we totally understand and respect her decision, and hopefully if we get to make another one, we can have her back." Cut to Scream 7, and Spyglass fired basically their entire cast and crew because Barrera posted something on social media in support of Palestine, which is something that gained a lot of media attention, as you probably well know. Neve Campbell did not pay Barrera the same professional respect, and said nothing publicly in support of her, as far as I can tell. Then, on March 12th, Neve Campbell announced that she was coming back to Scream 7, taking Barrera's job as the lead in that film. I hope that we can all at least agree that this is an objectively wrong thing for her to have done, both to her own legacy as well as to her peers. And that
I do agree with this point, but what the fuck does it have to do with the last point?
That's what I'm trying to fucking figure out. Again, this video is just a bunch of fucking tangents. Tangents after, like...
This is the kind of, like, this is how my my brain works when I'm really, really, really high. Like, I string together incoherent thoughts that don't actually work together but kind of make sense in a vacuum, and then I think it's something profound.
Yeah. I mean, that's... like, you hit the nail on the cup. You hit the nail.
would have just been better off to let the Scream door shut behind her and move on to new things while still being loved and remembered fondly. And that we also should not financially reward Spyglass by going to see their new Scream film, where they will absolutely be weaponizing nostalgia and goodwill against you to profit off of this. So in the weeks following, Barrera has since unfollowed Neve Campbell on social media, and it is clear who is deeply in the wrong in this situation.
Well, why are we bringing up so-and-so unfollowed so-and-so on social media like that's some gigantic point? Who fucking cares? It's the internet. It's not real.
I don't even know what the point of any of this shit is. He just fucking he just goes on and on and on, and it's like, well, what were we talking about again?
I think we're talking about bad conservative horror movies, but I'm not sure.
I mean, at the very least, he brought some up.
Am I the only one who gets the feeling that this entire script was him writing on the wall while rocking back and forth, mumbling about Wendigoon?
He hasn't even brought up Wendy. I like how, like, Wendigoon hasn't even been brought up yet.
That's the whole reason we reacted to this.
Exactly.
I want to
That's
look
the
at
whole
one
main
tweet in
reason anyone
particular.
talks about is because of Wendigoon stuff.
Yeah.
But
They
it's
got a
also,
lot of
like,
attention.
that's also, like, the funny thing is, like, you're sitting here watching, so, like, how does this, like, end up involving Wendigo?
Right? He's bringing up another tweet. Get ready.
The day of this announcement, they came from John Squires, the editor-in-chief for Bloody Disgusting. And I want it to be painfully clear, I am not mad at him, necessarily. I don't like what he said here, I think it's wrong. But everything that we're talking about today is done with the purpose of being constructive and looking at how we discuss these kinds of things. I want us all to do better and to be better as a community. And that is why I'm
Oh
taking
my
the time to
fucking
say all
God,
of
you
this.
don't have
Do
to-
not go harassing him on my
Let's get up on our soapbox and moral grandstand for 20 minutes after rambling like a fucking psychopath for 2 hours.
It's not even that, he's just fucking, he just stretches everything out.
That too.
And it's like, you don't have to fucking, like, use so many words to make your fucking point.
Just please read the tweet. I don't need you to preface it with a novel.
over this. If there's one thing that I want to take away from this video, it is that I do not want to publicly destroy someone with nuclear hellfire anymore just for a single thing that they said that we didn't like. If they
Oh, really?
Oh my
Really?
Okay, ignoring the hypocrisy of that statement, hasn't he? I feel like he said that like several times now. There's one thing I want you to take away from this video.
Yeah, I think he said it
Has
multiple
he-
times.
Ugh.
It's. I want to
Like,
fucking hang myself. It's getting
This
really
guy.
difficult. He's a goofy goober.
This guy.
It's getting really difficult to not want people to shit on him.
Yeah,
history
and we
of at
haven't even
least
gotten to the Wendigoon shit yet.
Yeah.
have good intentions. One perceived misstep, as long as it is not, hyper egregious, should not lead to the destruction of someone's professional life. We should be engaging with everything a person has said over their entire career and treating
I agree.
I don't know if he believes that though.
I'm gonna say that even though there's some obvious cognitive dissonance going on, he probably does believe that. But the problem is, you can't string together random shit and then pretend like it's a pattern of behavior. And that's exactly what he's going to do in the next chapter.
Well, this whole video is just like a string of like random shit
That's true.
barely related.
My snake just coughed. I don't know how I feel about this.
Are snakes supposed to cough?
It's generally a sign of a respiratory infection.
Oh no.
Now I'm a little worried. I'm gonna have to take her to the vet. Anyway, back to the video.
Okay.
empathy. And John is one
Wait,
of the
just
most
one
positive.
thing real quick.
Yeah.
Saying your snake cough, that could be, a euphemism.
Oh yeah, it was definitely a euphemism. I just came all over my computer screen. This man just exudes raw sexual masculine energy. Oh god, I hope he doesn't ever see this because he's going to assume that I was like sexually harassing him now over a joke. It's a joke, to be clear.
Constant forces within horror. And I think ultimately he meant well here. I've not said this before, but John is actually arguably the person who gave me my start here with this channel. And he doesn't even really know that
don't
probably.
fucking
Okay, so
care.
my second video that I ever made was that one on Goosebumps and 90s horror media for kids, if you remember. And
Okay, I don't fucking need to know all
What
this.
does this have to do with the tweet you're gonna read?
It's just tangent after tangent.
And now we're on a tangent where he gets to suck his own dick about his videos.
actually ran an article about the video on Bloody Disgusting, which got the attention of R.L. Stine, who then soon after tweeted about the video saying that he liked it, which led to me getting my first huge boost in subscribers that started my journey that led me to where I am right now.
That's actually
Trust me when
dope
I
as
say
hell.
that it is not normal for your second YouTube video
But it
that
has
you ever
nothing to do
make
with
to get
shit.
picked up by the algorithm, or covered in a news site, or tweeted about by the person that is the focus of that video. And the fact that it did, I think, can largely be attributed to John writing his article in support of me. And so, I feel kind of guilty about his inclusion here.
Okay,
And I really
that's
don't want this to
fair.
be read as an attack, and more so just as basic criticism, like I've said for everyone else in this video. Things that I would say about anybody, no matter who it was. And I include it here, because this one tweet I think is emblematic of a lot of issues around entertainment and horror at the moment that we're talking about. He said, just to get ahead of this overly simplified discourse, no, Neve Campbell isn't a bad person because she's taking a deserved paycheck that she spent her whole career earning. Life is complex. 10 things can be true at once. If you're upset at Spyglass, take it out on Spyglass. But the problem in this is that the situation actually is quite simple. On one side of the issue, you have people openly supporting a colonialist genocide, who are making a movie and a popular horror franchise, who also just got done making a film with Eli Roth, who is a Zionist and an all-around garbage human being. And on the
Is Eli Roth a Zionist? Do we know this for certain? Because I don't trust anything this man says.
I mean, it's probably not true if he doesn't, give us like 10 minutes of like, comment rating to like prove that he is.
True.
other side, you have people who think this is a problem. Sometimes, life is actually quite black and white. Any underlying shades of gray get overshadowed when it comes to things as extreme as what is happening in Palestine. When that many deaths
That's a
have
fair
happened,
point as well.
nuance isn't really allowed. It's one of the few times in life where you do definitively have to pick one side or the other, and in this
Okay, I
instance,
disagree with that. Everything has nuance.
Yeah.
Even
And I say that as someone who's definitely on the Palestine side.
Oh yeah, I'm fully in support of Palestine, 100%. Now that I've actually taken the time to look into what's going on, there's still a lot of nuance.
Yeah.
Neve Campbell chose money tainted by the death of children. I think that any actor who willingly took a paycheck in the 1940s to star in a film that was funded by the Nazis should similarly be branded as a bad person by history, who helped to propagate their values. Neve Campbell is a 50-year-old woman. She makes her own decisions and doesn't need to be shielded from the bad ones that she makes by journalists. She is fair game for her actions to be talked about, even
Just remember
Are
that
you
when
fair
people are...
game?
Yeah, you're fair game for your actions, too.
did play Sidney Prescott. Her decision does make her a bad person, and more than that, a coward. And this stance in this instance that Squires is taking is
God,
a
you were just
fundamentally
so
liberal centrist,
such a
where
morally
consumption
righteous
of product
jackass.
and the generation of money stands in front of any actual held values. And time again, we see that when this is done, centrism has to stand with the conservatives on practically every single issue. And when that
Bullshit.
happens, the real effects of harm are ignored, and the people perpetrating that harm are given the opportunity to actively expand their harm.
You haven't proven this at all. You've just said it.
They take more power and money and are seen with more public legitimacy. If you notice, money is at the root of all of these problems. And the reason that they are able to continue is by people saying that there's no harm in taking that money, no matter where the source of it may be coming from, because they themselves are not actively holding the gun with their own hand. Neve Campbell is not directly shooting anyone, but is making it painfully clear that she has no issue working with the people who are helping to hold the gun, and has no respect for any of her peers who were stomped down into the mud for having issues with the gun's presence. And the fact that a lot of horror personalities still embrace Scream 7 after everything that has happened is a clear demonstration of this mental phenomenon of genre fanaticism and money getting in the way of anything that they value in life, such as horror YouTuber Zach Cherry, who posted about how he got to meet the cast of the upcoming Scream 7, and how he was excited to make content about that, and Creepy Duck Design, who largely became famous for their Scream fan posters that they made that were so good that they just became actual official posters, which is pretty cool. But they have continued to make posters for Scream 7 to build their online brand, ignoring everything about the ongoing issue. I actually have a lot of respect in this regard to Dead Meat, who are physically in Scream 5 playing themselves, but have come out against the franchise because everything that has gone down. It is not hard to do, and I love that they were among the ones who did the right thing here, even though
I don't agree with the idea that there's no nuance in this situation, but at the same time, I kind of get the point that he's making here. But I feel like this is so far off the rails from what this video is supposed to be about that it makes no sense being in here.
I mean, you could say that about a lot of the fucking video.
You're not wrong.
they have personal and professional ties to the franchise, like Creepy Duck Design, who made the wrong decision. In connection to this, probably one of my most radical opinions is that the horror community has become way too reliant and cozy with the presence of the funding of Jason Blum's projects, who is probably the single person that I dislike the most within the gravity of horror film culture, when nearly every horror podcast and outlet over the past 6 or 7 years has been sponsored by whatever upcoming Blumhouse movies that are being released. I think that puts us all in a weird situation where this guy is at the center of everything that we do financially.
What's the problem with Blum? So I understand his point.
I don't know. I don't know shit about Jason. I don't know shit about Blumhouse. I just want to be clear. I fucking do not watch modern horror movies.
It's very rare that I watch modern horror. I don't mind it.
Exactly.
It's I don't even watch a lot of older horror. I love the idea of horror, but I'm very picky when it comes to the actual execution of horror.
Yeah. And see, that's why you should get your Rex from me, because I know the good stuff.
Best horror movie is The Thing.
Yeah.
And I mean
You should.
the one from the 70s or 80s or whatever, not the
It's the 80s.
80s. Okay,
Yeah.
I prefer that one, not the one from the 50s or the ones from the 2000s.
Yeah.
He has
I
to
think
me
you should
shown
watch
through
The Fly as well.
I do want to, and I will at some point, but I just bought a movie on YouTube, and I need to watch that before I buy another one. I've got
That's fair.
it's a personal mindset where I need to get value out of the thing that I paid for before I pay for something else.
Yeah, I get that.
So I've got to watch Jurassic Park.
Oh, I thought you already watched it.
I watched some of it, and then I got bored.
Oh, was it because the movie was boring, or you just weren't in the right mindset?
I wasn't in the right mindset, and I've watched it so many times that I can almost quote it word for word while I'm watching it, so I've got to be in the right mood.
That's understandable.
I was in the mood a week prior to getting paid, and then when I got paid, I bought it on impulse and then realized, wait, I'm not in the mood anymore.
That sucks.
actions that he actively holds values against what we should be standing for. I'm not trying to call anyone out in particular at all, because at this point, it is a very widespread problem. As a community at large, we are way too
But
financially
you
hooked to this guy
are
at a
about
level
to
that
make
frequently
a
makes
whole hit piece on Wendigo.
And not only that, you still haven't explained for us dumbasses in the audience why Blum is a bad person and why we shouldn't be accepting his financial,
Maybe he did
assistance.
explain and we just fucking forgot because he's fucking all over the place.
That's
'Cause
possible.
that's like what I'm having such a hard time following. Is it's like, wait, what were we talking about again? So, and
very
I'm sure I've
uncomfortable.
repeated that a million times already,
Mm-hmm.
but I really don't know what.
So are we gonna watch his video on the Hills Have Eyes too?
Maybe we can later.
I want
Not
to.
tonight, though. Not after I'm. Like I feel like if we finish this tonight, which just has like another hour,
Yeah.
so we're pretty close to the Wendigoon thing at least. But it's like, yeah, I'm gonna be like, yeah,
I'm curious. I'm genuinely
I
curious
am too.
if this is a pattern of behavior or if this video was a one-off thing where he was just so fucking angry and in his own sauce that he just fucked up really bad.
Yeah. I mean, if
I
you
am-
want to do it later tonight, I like him, but I'll definitely need a fucking break.
No. If we
No.
finish this tonight, I'm gonna need at least a week before I even look at this man again.
This
They
guy.
question anyone's ethics and legitimacy when I hear them do an ad read for a Blumhouse product. I genuinely can't say for sure because I get a lot of emails like this, and honestly, I don't read most of them. But I am 99% sure that I have been offered money by them at several points in the past for an ad read for upcoming films. And essentially, everyone who works in horror has as well, or gifts or what have you, and a great deal of them have accepted that offer. I, as a blanket rule, have never accepted gifts or sponsorship for my work, even though I get a constant stream of email offers about them. And if I ever do end up doing one, then I hope you will take that as a sign that I genuinely endorse that company and that product. For the record, I have also never accepted a gift in any form from any company that makes horror media. I think
Okay, I can respect that to an extent, but at the same time, it feels like he's morally grandstanding how he's superior to everyone else by even bringing it up. And at the same
Yeah.
time, this has nothing to do with the thesis of your video.
Well, it also feels a bit irresponsible when he's like fucking complaining about not making enough fucking money.
That too. That's another good point.
Which, especially if he has a partner who he's supposed to support, apparently.
I
He
can
doesn't want to fucking get a job.
I can kind of understand standing by your art by its own merits and refusing to accept a sponsorship in an artsy-fartsy sort of way. I can kind of get it. But if you're going to
Yeah.
do that, you need to get a full-time job to cover the losses that you're not, for the income that you're not getting.
Instead of, whining that, people aren't watching your fucking videos.
Yeah.
of transparency is important there, and I would always disclose if I accepted something. The most that I have ever accepted is from individual authors working independently who have offered to send me free copies of their books because they like my work. But if I ever thought that taking that would put me in a compromising situation that might stand in the way of my own honesty, I would always say no in every single situation. The only thing I have of value left to me in this world is my writing and my perspective, and I would never do a single thing that compromised that, even if that meant I occasionally had to do something that was not the most socially nice thing to do. If the worst thing that you can come at me with is that I'm not always overwhelmingly nice in every single situation, then I can live with that. Because there is a difference between kind and nice, and I'd like to think that I deliver on kind where it counts. Most of us who work here for a living have either had contact with Blum or his company, and almost every one of those interactions have been financially motivated. It just all too often to me feels like we have collectively agreed to this deal with the devil, and everyone is kind of afraid to even talk about it or acknowledge that it's a thing, because, to a degree, everyone's hands are kind of dirty from being in the pot. Again, I'm not trying to make accusations against anyone on a personal level. I understand why someone would feel like they needed to take a sponsorship from them, but I hope that after saying this, everyone who is in this position from now on will consider if that money is actually worth it. Because as it stands now, everyone from horror TikTokers and freelance writers on up to the largest horror publications like Fangoria and Bloody Disgusting pose to make a lot of money every single time Blumhouse puts out a large movie. And I'm just here to ask in the politest way that I can for everyone to consider if that is the most ethical thing that we could be doing in this moment. And I hope to stand as an example to show that a horror content business can be run without platforming things like that.
You're running a sinking ship, and you were before this video was released, and you're acting, and you've got that fucking smug grin on your, This guy pisses me off so much.
Okay, but is he gonna tell us why Jason Blum is bad?
No, he's obviously not. He just expects us to go into this knowing.
Because I know that we're about to get to the Wendigo and stuff, because it's almost like...
Yeah.
There's about 50 minutes of this left.
Yep.
Or no, there's an hour left, so yeah, we have to be...
At this point, basically without reviewing a single Blumhouse movie, and that has been intentional. If I ever do platform something from them, or something else that I similarly view as a bit dubious, I always address that before I even start talking about why I want to talk about the work itself. As critics, as journalists, as fans, I think we owe it to each other as a community to be forthright with these things, because ultimately, it is within our power what companies we decide to give our voice to. I view Fangoria as being kind of the cultural steward of horror, and they've kind of held that position for decades now. And with that does come a certain level of responsibility in relation to what they decide to publish, because their voice matters. And in my opinion, sometimes they have not been the best about that when it comes to Blum and his movies. I think they often will do great work, and if they hate me after this for saying all of this, that would actually make me tremendously, deeply sad, because all of this comes from a place of love and professional respect for their position within genre history. And I want that all to be said up front. But for the emphasis that they place on gathering people from different backgrounds to show their own perspectives, for all the great queer writers that they have, the non-white writers, the women writers, the industry legends, just the general professionalism that they typically will show in producing a horror magazine that is managing to thrive in 2024, I just think it's a shame how much their brand relies on Blum's money. Because since the rebranding, out of 22 issues that they have produced by my count, 8 of them feature a Blumhouse movie somewhere on the cover, with 4 of them being the full-blown cover story. And each time that they get a cover story, usually that means there will be multiple articles on the interior dedicated to that Blumhouse movie. And, we all know that 9 times out of 10, these movies are either going to be garbage or just barely passable. The Blumhouse system of rushing things out the door made for $20 does not produce great work most of the time, to the point where they have really started to lose their cultural footing by falling into total self-parody, like Night Swim, about the haunted swimming pool that features a Major League Baseball playing protagonist who is suffering from Lou Gehrig's disease. Out of their movies that have been on the cover of Fangoria, I would argue that Halloween 2018 and Megan are the only ones that are just okay, with the other ones being genuinely outright bad. And as an organization, they should not be stooping to sell their audience on total garbage movies that they know full and well are absolute pieces of shit. We don't need to be giving Blumhouse and their lazy anti-art system this...
So the problem with Blum is that he makes bad movies. That's what I'm gathering. Is that what you're
Well,
gathering?
no, well, Blumhouse is like they publish these movies. They're just a publisher.
Okay.
I don't know if they actually make any movies directly or what, but I know that like these aren't all just like these aren't just all movies that are directed by Jason Blum. These are like movies that were published by Blumhouse.
Okay, so I'm still confused as to why Blum is a bad person.
Well, okay, and the weird thing to me is I know at some point like Blumhouse was kind of seen as like a hero of horror. Where like they like I guess there's a lot of trash, but like they had like the good ones coming out or something. I don't know. I mean, most of my knowledge comes from Twitter and Red Letter Media because again, I don't fucking watch modern horror.
See, the biggest problem is that normally with a video like this, if they left out something important like this, I would be interested to research more and learn more and find out. But he is such a bad presenter, and I am so disengaged that I don't even want to research it.
Well, there's so much that you would have to fucking research.
True.
Because it's like he's completely shit at like deciding like what he should actually, go into detail about.
Yeah.
Publicity and attention when there are so many other better and more interesting things made that don't get the mainline spotlight that they deserve. And to their credit, Fangoria does work hard to spotlight smaller films in every single issue. They are among the best at getting people excited for little movies, and I think they should stretch that talent more to really embrace and lift up the smaller side of horror, which has always been our most interesting work and the backbone of what we all do. To me,
Our most interesting work? The backbone of what we all do? Motherfucker, you don't do this!
Yeah, I'm kind of noticing that too.
see Blumhouse at their absolute best as the MCU equivalent of horror movies, and I do not mean that as a compliment. I think they are bad for horror. I think they are a bad company that makes mediocre, uninspired, ugly art 9 times out of 10. And when they accidentally let a good one through the cracks, it almost certainly is not because they were helping the filmmaker in that process. They famously use market research a ton in deciding the final cuts of their films. And as I've said before, as someone who used to work in film market research before becoming a YouTuber, that process only hurts the work and has, in my opinion, basically never once made a single movie better. They might as well just be hiring a team of carnival psychics to tell them what to do. And I also don't think that just because they are one of the largest public entities of championing horror, that they shouldn't be criticized. In fact, the opposite is true. Their motives absolutely should be evaluated on what they are doing and also what they bring to the table. The business of making movies is a business. Profit is always the goal. Movies are made to make a profit, obviously. Movies are art, but all art and how we have structured our society, for better or for worse, has to be sustainable. Everybody has to eat, and they need a roof over their heads. But there's a difference between being successful to the point of sustainability and being a Silicon Valley-style tycoon who doesn't even really seem to care all that much about movies other than the capital they can generate. I absolutely hate that one of the largest public faces of horror for the past decade or so looks like if you type CEO into an AI image generator. And on that note, one of his newest movies, Imaginary, is actually being accused by some of feeling as if it had been written or at least influenced by an AI. Which is what the magic of market research will buy you, by the way. It is an industry of people who are severely depressed that are slowly going insane. I had to watch the trailer for the 2016 children's film Monster Trucks. I would ballpark somewhere in between 400 and 500 times. It is hard to describe what that mentally does to a person when you do that all day long for weeks upon weeks, until the trailer is supposedly perfect down to the individual frame, only for you to move on to a new unbearable horror. Unless people are talking about Get Out, then historically when they are talking about Blumhouse as a company on social media, they are talking about how cheap their movies are or how much money they make. Like that should even be the point of all of this. Ever since Paranormal Activity, Blum has been defined by how he can make a film for under $10 million and sometimes spin it to generate hundreds of millions at the box office. But
Blumhouse did Paranormal Activity?
I guess.
I didn't know that. That was an
didn't know
okay
that.
movie. I don't care how much money it made. It was okay.
more than that, his legacy should be defined by the seemingly toxic work environment that he has created, the boys' club that he has built around himself, as well as the repeated backing of conservative films and filmmakers, despite calling himself a liberal to make money. which he clearly views as
Okay,
being
yeah,
more important
so
than any
they-
values that he
Okay, conservative bad. Okay, good.
Alright, now I understand why Blumhouse is an issue. Okay.
actually holds in this world.
Yeah,
You know,
for a minute there, I thought
you
like
know,
the harassment was like the issue, but not. But he be back to conservative directors and stuff.
Yep. Because clearly that's the bigger problem.
want good original horror to thrive and to be successful. I am always happy when movies do well, but at the same time, the cartoonish reaction that people had on Twitter to Megan making $30 million in its first weekend was a little gross to me. All I heard about was how much it made, and how they cut the violence and blood and kills out of a slasher movie to get it down to a PG-13 rating to make more money, and how that was a good thing that the studio cut up a movie to make it worse because we have to worship the dollar just to see how rich Jason Blum can possibly get. Genuinely. Almost no one was actually talking about whether Megan was actually good or not. Nobody was talking about the movie itself, just the environment around the movie. The product itself is second to the money. Listen.
If that's true, that's actually a salient and good point. Still has nothing to do with the thesis of the video, but that's actually a good point.
Yeah. See, that's the thing. He's like, even when he makes a good point, you just have to like sit there and think, what does this have to fucking do with? I guess at least this is on point somewhat.
Yeah,
No.
I'm trying to be as fair as possible and praise the good points that he makes as well as criticize the bad points. But it's really
Yeah.
fucking hard when none of the points have anything to do with the idea of the video.
Well, I guess the idea, or again, I guess the idea is that, like, you know, like making money is like inherently conservative.
But see, if that's the main thesis of the video, then why was there a big issue with what's his name in that stupid horror movie convention at the beginning?
Kevin Spacey in the horror movie. I guess. I fucking know.
About a Blumhouse film, and it's always the same. Oh yeah, Five Nights at Freddy's sure was a big piece of shit, but did you see how much money it made? The conversation is always entirely surrounded on celebrating Blum's profit.
I thought everybody loved the Five Nights at Freddy's movie. I mean, I'm
I
never
don't
going to
know.
watch it because I hate the franchise and I have no investment in it whatsoever. Sorry, Five Nights at Freddy's fans, but I just don't care about it.
I mean, I'm terminally online, and I just don't feel like I've seen like that big conversation about, you know, how much money all these films have made.
I don't feel like I've seen anything super negative about Five Nights at Freddy's anyway, about how it was a big piece of shit.
Well, I mean, it might have been, it may not have been. I don't fucking know.
I don't know, maybe because my timeline is filled with a bunch of idiots who praise everything that's popular in the zeitgeist, but I haven't seen any real negativity towards Five Nights at Freddy's.
I do think there's like an issue with, like, you know, people who care too much about how successful something is.
Yeah.
As like a way to say, like, oh, this is good, that's why it's successful, but that goes way beyond just horror.
Yeah, that's a problem with pretty much everything.
It's not, I don't even think it's really so much a conservative thing. That's just like a simple, like, black and white way for some people to say, oh, this is good.
Yeah, and that's a problem everywhere. Like, paintings, like, modern art, I'm not a big fan of. If you're into it, that's cool. But, like, a picture of a red circle can sell for, like, $500,000. And that's considered successful art in the art, quote-unquote, community.
Well, first of all, it's a square, man. It's a red square.
That changes everything. Now it makes more sense.
There's, like, a fucking, like, movie. It's called Hamlet. And it's not an adaptation of Shakespeare, or maybe it is, if, you know, you have the imagination for it, but it's like 66 minutes, and it's like a white screen the whole time.
Fuck yeah, real art.
Horror is supposedly back, even though it never went anywhere. And And in the case of Megan, when I saw it a few weeks into its run, I felt a resounding feeling of, that was fine, which is what I feel when I watch their work almost across the board. So I tend to kind of avoid them,
You just
because
said most of
they
their
aren't
movies are
actually even
garbage.
really full movies. All art is a product, but we can agree that some art is more of a product than others. I don't think that anyone would argue that
I don't know
Ubisoft
that
or
all
EA
art is a product.
I can
But I guess that depends on what you mean by product.
the lowly Twitter artist who's making masterpieces but only has 500 followers, I don't feel like their art is a product.
Or I mean, not all people even like share their art with like the public.
Yeah, that's another good point.
Like there's a guy named Devil Doll, and he made like an album, but like he never released it. He just made like one copy and kept it for himself.
That's actually kind of cool.
It's kind of cool, but it's also like, fuck, I want to know what it sounds like now.
This video is bad. In Praise of Shadows is a goofy goober. I just want to get to the Wendigoon part and go home, even though I am home.
games are more art than they are money-making ventures. Blumhouse movies are polished to the point of not possibly offending a single person who has a dollar in their pocket. By lacking any perspective or artistic goal other than to minimally entertain. Blum, who started as a sub-executive, reporting directly to Harvey Weinstein at Miramax, which is something that he has to me kind of tried to downplay in the years since, is in my eyes the symbol of everything that horror should not strive to be. Here are just several things that he has done since he started his company, and positioned himself at the center of horror as a business. During the height of the strikes last year, he casually posted a picture of him holding a shotgun with David Zaslav, the most hated man in Hollywood, with the caption, "Sun Valley Soldiers." He once tweeted, "I got feedback from my team at Blumhouse, and pictured below are my room for improvement categories. I am tweeting this to help remind myself to do these things and improve."
Okay, so what's the...
What? I'm guessing like there's gonna be something wrong with the things he has there, but I can't see it.
Stay present, listen, slow down, be compassionate, create a safe space for ideas, don't yell, be less impulsive, share information, say thank you, hire diverse.
Shouldn't he like that?
That's
Or
all.
what does the other thing even have to? What was it, the Sun Valley? What was it? With the gun? What was it?
He took a picture with a gun.
Was that the whole issue?
I don't even know if it was an issue. He just threw it out there and then moved along. He does this a lot. He just throws shit out there and then walks away from it.
Unless it's like not important, then he like goes into excruciating detail
Yeah.
and repeats himself over and over again.
Or makes a 10,000 word essay prefacing the thing that he's about to talk about that doesn't actually matter.
We might should like stop like pausing this so much.
List included the following: stay present, listen, slow down, be compassionate, create a safe space for ideas, don't yell, be less impulsive, share information, say thank you, and hire diverse. And I'm honestly kind of astonished that he willingly tweeted that the people in his circle told him that he had to stop being racist, stop belittling the people who work for him, to stop verbally
When did
abusing
somebody say
them, and to just be decent around others. Because
This is the,
that is
uh,
basically what that
pancakes
list
waffles
says.
thing.
He was asked by a fan on Twitter in 2021 about his film production's relationship to COVID. With the
How would
surge,
the-
is Halloween Ends going to start filming and be released on schedule? To which he said, "So far, yeah. We are like the only ones shooting. My views on Omicron are extreme. If I shared them, my PR team would most likely burn down my house with me in it." I'm not trying to put words in his mouth, but at least to me, when I read that, it seems that he is implying that he did not care if his employees got COVID under his command and possibly died, so long as the product continued to get made and that he could get even more wealthy. And
That's
then
a
on
fucking
top
leap
of
in
that,
logic,
one
but
of his
okay.
biggest crimes against horror to me is that he sat down to be a guest on the Ben Shapiro show. You know, the old
Oh,
1940s
no!
phrase that roughly goes, if you have 10 people and one Nazi willingly sitting down for a meal together, then all you have is 11 Nazis. So if
Ben
one film
Shapiro,
executive sits
the
down with a
Jew
fascist for a civil
is a
conversation,
Nazi.
then all you have are two fascists being broadcast over the internet, who are helping to enshrine each other's cultural power. At the top of the interview, he even jokes that he is ready for a wave of hatred just for
fucking hate
willing to
Ben
be seen in
Shapiro,
the
and
same
now I
room as
wanna
Shapiro
defend him.
publicly.
Fuck
So he
you.
definitely understands what he's doing here. He wasn't tricked into any of this. And in that, he has some pretty wild quotes that I think really shows that his heart is not in the right place, as far as the soulless, empty art that he produces is concerned, and to a greater degree, demonstrates the corruptive effect his legacy has had on how we look at modern horror cinema in general. One thing that I agree with the right about is how a lot of Hollywood, including myself, is out of touch with America, with the taste of America. There shouldn't be red state, blue state movies, there should just be good movies. I'd go so far as to say that if you were sitting with a director and they said, you know, you made Get Out, you made The Purge, you made The Hunt, I want to make a political movie. I want to do it about X topic. I want to do it about global warming. That is when I say we're in trouble, because I think it is virtually impossible to make a fun, entertaining movie and think of the topic first. I think you have to think in your heart what's super scary. And if you can fold politics into that, like Jordan thinks about race all the time, clearly. Get Out came from that. But you can't just say, I want to make a scary story about global warming. Hollywood had a red flag list for people Harvey Weinstein was worried about because they were talking badly about him. And I was on the list. And I was happy that I was on it. I wish that it was true what he said about me, because I wasn't actually doing that. The most important thing I want to say, and the reason I'm doing your show, is to say that all of Hollywood is not the same. We are different. I can be liberal, but talk to you and be on your show and make a movie called The Hunt. But if there was an amazing horror movie that came to me and it pushed a conservative value, I would make it. So I think that's probably the most important thing. At one point near the end, Ben Shapiro says, I get a lot of questions from people in my audience that say, I really want to work in Hollywood. I love storytelling. I'm afraid that because I was a member of Students for Trump, then now I'm going to go to Hollywood, and that's on my Facebook page, and I'm not going to get a job. To which Jason Blum says, well then, you have to come to our office. We will give you a job in a second. And I hope that you can see that these things are business major brain rot ideas that violate the concept of how art should be made. Everything that he's saying here is how you wind up with the kinds of bad movies that have no perspective that Blumhouse produces. It is 100% reasonable to start a screenplay with a theme that you want to express. I would call that good writing. Please, if you want to make movies, do not start writing a horror script based around only the scares that you can think of first, and hope that some thematic through lines will come into your work through divine intervention, because it does not work that way. All good writers know that you need to have some forethought into what you are trying to express, so that you can then build a narrative around that. In fact, in my opinion, the actual writing of the script should be the very last part of the process. That is, following, months of just thinking about your story from every single angle. And also, you should not be concerned at all moments on if your art is actually entertaining or not. I would argue that if you have produced an intelligent script that is compelling or makes your audience work and to think, then it will be engaging in its own right. And that entertainment is for live sports and social events. Writers should not at all times in every circumstance concern themselves with the idea of the word entertainment, because that is a hole that once fallen down will very often lead to hacky dialogue and art that is not true to the person who is creating it. Basically, I'm saying that if you're wanting to make something, you should never once consider if your audience is actually going to like it while you're working on it, because the art needs to be made out of your own personal enjoyment and perspective that comes from the act of self-expression, of ideas that are important and compelling to you. And if you do that, if you make something that you are passionate about, then one day you will find your audience. And some will think I'm saying that everything should be art house, and that is not what I'm getting at all. You can make pop art through that exact same mindset. I highly doubt that James Cameron cares for a second if anyone found Avatar 2 to be entertaining. He is clearly making these for himself. And, I think that's a great thing. We just get the benefit of being able to watch him do this and to make these films that he makes. If you want to learn how to be a good writer, please go watch the Jason Blum and Ben Shapiro hour-long interview, and then take to heart the exact opposite of every single thing that those men say. Oh, and one other thing, remember Dashcam that we talked about a little while ago? That was a Blumhouse movie. You remember They/Them? That was also a Blumhouse movie. They are kind of the kings of the conservative bent to horror. One criticism of the genre that you could legitimately make is about how it's been done for a long time, in that horror is a genre largely built on the trauma of women, fearing and being attacked by men, who often are not actually allowed to voice their experiences through the art that they make, while men make money off of telling their stories. Women are almost never allowed to write or direct major films still today, which is a huge problem across the entire film industry. But it is especially bad with Blumhouse. Almost every single Blumhouse movie stars a woman who is saying lines about how her character should feel that a man wrote for her. You know, just spitballing here, but if I was being accused of being an abusive and sexist boss, who also hangs out with David Zaslav and was just generally awful, not just by the people around me, but also by critics for popular news organizations, and I was also in the process of basically remaking one of the most famous movies of all time about a woman experiencing violence from a powerful man, I probably would have used that as an opportunity to buy myself some public goodwill and hire some women to make that movie, instead of a male director that was mostly known before this for male-focused stoner comedies, 3 male writers, 15 male producers, 3 male composers, a male cinematographer, a male editor, a male production designer, a male art director, and basically an all-male crew. Outside of actors, the only women who held any prominent positions within Halloween were the production manager, the casting director, and the costume designer. And the same could be said for the next 2 movies in the series as well, despite all 3 of them basically pretending to be about why it is important to listen to women. And then, years later, if I was still having that same criticism placed against me, and I was remaking yet another classic movie about violence against women, or at least, you know, women in peril, and also after having publicly said that I had changed my ways and learned because I listened to the people around me, I would probably surround myself on that project with some different people, instead of hiring that same male director, 4 male writers, 13 male producers, 2 male composers, a male cinematographer, a male editor, a male production designer, and 2 male art directors, with again, the only major production roles being filled by women being casting directors, costume designers, and set decorators. But you know, that's just me. Blumhouse have been involved in the production of 152 movies in total, or, according to Dan Aykroyd, a little over 1% of all films that have ever been made, with basically every single film in their catalog either being about women main protagonists or having women hold very prominent roles within the film's narrative, and often very traditional roles for these women characters, such as mothers of straight white families or sisters.
Epic game of modern warfare.
Yeah, that's what save buttons are for, pal.
The overwhelming amount of women characters in their films are either this or someone who is younger that is being pursued by a straight white guy. They have almost no films that are almost exclusively about men, which I think is fairly common for the horror genre, especially popcorn PG-13 horror films, which are very dominated by women protagonists, which is Blumhouse's bread and butter. I did actually recently see a study that said that only 44% of horror films actually have women protagonists, which, on a surface level, I don't really believe, but it very well may be true. And I may think that there are more women protagonists than there are, because the films that star women often just work better on a conceptual level than the ones that star men to me. Horror is about social injustice and an imbalance of power, and people fighting back against that. And it is hard to buy a general horror situation if you make the protagonist an upper-class white guy, who has struggled, you know, very little in his life. It is definitely true that if you go through their catalog, Blumhouse overwhelmingly makes films that have strong feminine presence within their narratives. Now, this is going off of my count, and I might be a little off here because there are just a lot of titles to go through, and I might have missed a couple here or there. But from what I can tell, out of their 152 films, only 25 of them have been written by women, and only 17 of them have been directed by women. 19 of them were written by people who were not white, and 26 of them were directed by people who were not white. Every other role on these projects was filled by a white man. So if we say that's 152 movies, then that is 304 jobs, although some of these films did have multiple writers and directors. But for the sake of simplicity, we will say that every movie had 1 writer position and 1 director position. So, by those numbers, that means that Blumhouse historically is only hiring 14% non-white creatives and 13% women creatives for those roles. And if you took James Wan, Jordan Peele, and M. Night Shyamalan out of the equation, their non-white hiring numbers plummet to almost near 0. Which makes it almost cartoonish when you see that they have movies made up.
If you take out these people of color, then my point is correct. What?
Black people, such as Exorcist Believer and Maw, which were both written and directed by white guys, and that they always advertise their films as, from the studio that brought you Get Out, but rarely actually hire non-white people or women for behind-the-camera roles on their projects, unless they are already famous and can be leveraged to generate money for them from that. And also it should be said that almost all of these hires, both for people of color and for women, come in the past couple of years after people started to realize that they basically exclusively only hired white dudes, and began to criticize them for those practices. Also, I do think that it is very interesting that after the hit that they had with Get Out, that Jordan Peele left the company and distanced himself from Blum. Typically, if you have an iconic work of art, you tend to kind of stick with that team that has a proven model for success. And I think that it is very telling that the two never seem to acknowledge each other anymore, except for when Blum uses Get Out to seem more progressive than he actually is. At one point, when asked about why he only hired white men for top positions in his films, he said that there was simply no women to hire, and was quoted as saying, "We're always trying to do that. We're not trying to do that because of recent events. We've always been trying. There are just not a lot of female directors, period, and even less that are inclined to do horror. I'm a massive admirer of Jennifer Kent. I've offered her every movie we've had available. She's turned me down every time." Which is like the most shameful answer he could have given there. To say that he's always looking to hire these people, but that they simply just don't exist is so fucking silly. If Blumhouse tweeted that they were looking for young women to make films for them, they would have hundreds or thousands of people responding that they would love to be given that opportunity. I'm just trying to point out a painfully glaring pattern in their structural behavior as a company, which I hope you can recognize is a big issue. So just in general, I think the whole company and their output could fall into this category of being bad conservative horror movies to some degree or another. But for this last one, I'd like to focus on The Hunt. There was a movie that was so marred by false controversy and culture war bullshit that even Trump tweeted about it when he was still president, saying, "Liberal Hollywood is racist at the highest level, and with great anger and hate. They like to call themselves elite, but they are not elite. In fact, it is often the people that they so strongly oppose that are actually the elite. The movie coming out is made in order to inflame and cause chaos. They create their own violence and then try to blame others. They are the true racists and are very bad for our country." So, to generate false controversy, Blum pulled the film from release himself, basically saying that as a work of art, it was just too dangerous to release to the public in the current political climate. Which, considering that he was seemingly willing to sacrifice his employees to COVID on the altar of money, I don't really buy the safety excuse, and instead see this as a publicity move to get people to talk about his lackluster films. Because when they later released it, it gave them the opportunity to then advertise it as the most talked about movie of the year is one nobody's seen yet. And then when you watch the movie, it is the most middle-of-the-road, centrist, weak, fake controversial stuff that you've ever seen. They uses 2016 buzzwords like deplorables to incite feelings in the most non-threatening way possible. It is Facebook activism, and depicts conservatives and liberals as both causing harm, but only doing so in a way that reinforces each other, and ultimately does nothing to challenge any semblance of the status quo. I think that any movie that on the surface wants to be seen as deeply political and as an important work of art, but then restrains itself to only comparing Republicans and Democrats is not something that should be treated as a serious exercise of social satire that is being done in good faith, and should be seen for what it is, which is a knife to skim cream off the current tensions of the American culture for profit. They are in this moment no different from the talking heads of Fox News or MSNBC, who get paid to lie 24 hours a day. But I think the biggest argument that you could make about how weak The Hunt actually is as a work of satire comes from something that Blum says to Shapiro in their interview, that I think demonstrably shows how his centrism allows passage for Shapiro's fascism. The Hunt is about how the country is so polarized. I did a lot of research on you before I came in here, because I was told of your views. And I looked at what you've said and done, and all you've expressed is a conservative point of view. I believe a lot of things that are different from you. We probably have many more things that are in common, and share many more beliefs than our political beliefs. And the idea that we can't talk to each other or that I can't come on your show makes me furious. The movie really makes fun of both sides. This movie does not take sides politically.
That's a bad thing. That fucking transition just gave me whiplash.
Holy shit.
We finally made it to Wendigoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Can you imagine? A quick question. Can you imagine, watching this, not knowing, anything about it, and then you hit this transition, it's like, wait, what? It's chapter 4 Wendigo, it's like, what? That's a complete whiplash, because it's like, It was it's just jarring. I thought he was still like in the middle of trying to make some fucking points, and it just goes chapter 4, Windigoon.
I hate to be a gigantic cock tease, but we've been recording for 3 fucking hours. I think we need to finish up tomorrow for part 3.
That's completely fine with me because I need a fucking break from this shit.
Oh my god, my brain is rotting. Thank you everybody for showing up for all 5
20,
of you.
well, yeah, you got 20 views last time.
Yeah, it's gonna go down. The diminishing returns principle or whatever the fuck. It's probably gonna be like 5 views, but thank you for anybody who stuck around this long. Be sure to leave a nasty comment, dislike, unsubscribe.
Yeah.
And honestly, I don't hate In Praise of Shadows, but I don't like him either, and it's very...
I hate him.
His writing is terrible. He needs to take some classes on writing and how to structure
He
things
needs
cohesively.
psychological help, I think.
That too.
He needs a fucking lot of things.
He needs to get off the internet for a while and take a fucking break.
Yeah, I like how we had like a cameo, a Matt cameo that just kind of like
Petered out after 5 minutes. I didn't think he was gonna last as long as he did, to be honest. We also had a Zara interruption for 30 seconds.
Yeah.
That was fun, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah.
This was fucking brain dead. That's the nicest way I can put it.
This guy, that's like all I can say. It's just this guy.
He's a
This
goofy
guy
goober.
right here. Just goofy goober.
Alright, we're done. Goodbye.
Yeah.